Duke, you suck.
You shut your mouth!
Welcome to the Duke You Suck podcast. And now, Duke Durango.
All right.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Duke You Suck podcast. I'm here with a good friend, in my opinion, an independent legend. And I'm sure if I went there, a legend of Puerto Rico wrestling. Andy Anderson, man, welcome. I'm so glad to have you on the show. Welcome to the
Thank
program.
you. It's been a while. I know we've done some podcasts together in the past, and it was always been fun, always been a blast. And you started up your podcast, and you know, I always see it coming through the feeds, and you always have a lot of great guests. So I was like, man, it's like, hopefully I get a chance to do this. So I'm glad to be here with you.
Thanks for coming on, man. Well, there's certain guys I wanted to wait till I had a little bit of chops, right? I wanted to wait till I, could actually had a feel for what I was doing. So I abused like TJ Wilson and Natty Neidhart with my very first ones.
Right. Yeah. So those are the ones you should have been doing Andy Anderson with. So then later when you got to TJ and Natty, you'd have been a little a little more polished.
Yeah, I have a feeling there might not be a second ask.
No return bout.
No. Yeah, I think I'll just let that one lie for now. Yeah. So how's it going, man? You're one guy I follow a lot, especially on Facebook, man.
Yep.
I think you know this, but I absolutely love your posts with your kids. Like
Thank
that's
you.
one of the things I look forward to every day is,
I appreciate it.
hashtag, living the best life, daddy's girls. Like I love all
Daddy's
that.
girls. Yeah. No, that's they keep me going. There's depending how deep and how far back we go, there's a lot to, we each have our own stories.
Yeah.
There's a lot to mine. And my two little girls, one's 8, one's 5. They're my world. I literally would not be here today if it wasn't for them. And I just love it. Like I love being a dad. I love them. And I don't have much of a life because most of it has to do with my girls. But that's
man, I hate it when people say that because that's a pretty good life.
You know what? You're right.
Yeah.
It is. I look at it though because there was at one point, I've kind of just touched there. Like I've had my share of mental health struggles and issues, and
Right.
I've seen like psychologists and psychiatrists, and at one point several years ago we were talking about like purpose in life.
Okay.
And it was like, okay, well, part of it's like being a father, being a dad, and it's like, okay, well, you need, you should have, and like something else, like extra stuff, and part of it, a little bit was the wrestling, and I didn't really have anything. That's kind of like I was down in the dumps, and I kind of eventually kind of came to the realization that it's like, like the girls, like that is the purpose. That's my purpose, and the time flies, but at the same time it doesn't. So it's like I try to enjoy. Like I'd like to think of myself these days as like a meme philosopher.
Right.
I don't know philosophy. I can't do a lot of like ancient philosophy, but it's like so many of these memes that pop up. I'm like, but that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
This is right. That makes
Well,
sense.
that's the thing. These people go hard on what the memes we put on Facebook. It's like, man, you have no idea how grounded a lot of that shit keeps me.
It does, and it's for me too. Like, and I post it. I post stuff first and foremost for myself, but I get feedback, from people like yourself and others that are like, man, like I love your posts. They're positive. They're this and that, and it's like I'm not trying to be, the world is sunshine and daisies, because it's not, and I know it's not. But there's enough negativity. There's enough crap out there that it's like, okay,
especially on social media.
Oh, especially on social media. So. I have those, it's all like the little affirmations or reaffirmations or just thoughts that, they pop up in my feed. Cool. I'm going to share the positive. It pops up in my history, my story. Memories on Facebook. Cool, man. Like, that's worth repeating. And that's what I do. And if it helps out somebody, brings a smile, brings a laugh, or, you're down in the dumps, it's like, okay, man, like, hey, like that resonates. Yeah.
Well, that's
awesome.
I'll tell you, every hashtag Ruby Tuesday, man, I laugh every time.
That's one of the most popular, and it amazes me how many people will actually comment like, oh, like I look forward to Ruby Tuesday and Ruby this
Presley
and that.
Friday's wicked. Like I love those days, right? Like it's those girls have these infectious smiles.
Yes, they
No.
do. They have great personalities. I know everyone's biased about their own kids, and they're all going to say it, and it's probably true to an extent, but mine's more true than most.
Okay, so my daughter's grown, and I don't have to I don't have
Okay.
any kids at home to hear this shit. So I
Right.
can tell you, I'm pretty biased. Your kids are amazing. Like they're so
Awesome.
adorable, and it's
Thank
like
you.
I look at your post and I get a little toothache because it's so sweet.
Well, the Presley Friday was funny because it was like one day, like obviously they're young and they don't have like social media accounts and stuff. And Presley saw me doing something about like the Ruby Tuesday, and she's like, "Well, like I want a day."
Oh, fair enough.
I said, "Well, like Ruby Tuesday, that's always kind of been a thing." I said, "There's like a restaurant. There was like the song from the Rolling Stones," and she's like, "No," she says, "I think there's gonna be Presley Friday."
I love that.
All right, and that's so going forward,
He calls her
henceforth.
shot just like that.
Yep,
I think
yep.
there's going to be.
And so that's what I do. I mean, the WCW, the Woman Crush Wednesday or whatever it is.
Is that what that is? Okay,
Yes,
I don't know what that is.
not the World Championship Wrestling. I can understand. I know people get mixed up.
I was like, yeah, man, I didn't even know Andy worked there.
I did 2 matches for WCW.
Oh, did you? Okay,
I did. But yeah, so I think that's what it is. So those are my little women. So that's what that, and then the Ruby Tuesday, the Presley Friday, and then if stuff pops up in the memories or whatever, we go to toboggan, we go to the water park, or just something silly, a silly dance, whatever is just to me like fun stuff that I'd like to share it. And the other thing I look at too is, barring an apocalypse, and some days seems like it might be here sooner than others. Social media is going to be around for ages. And I know there's going to be a point where the girls are going to have their Facebook and they're going to have their Instagram. So I'd love for them to, if they're going to do a little, digging and see daddy's posts. I tell them every day that I love them, and they know that I do, and I'm proud of them, and they mean the world to me. But they can see, I'm posting about how proud I am of this or this,
right.
or I'm showing off this as a proud father, a proud dad, and that's what means the most to me, and it makes me happy. And if I can, if people like it, cool. If you don't like it, well, then you just keep scrolling or unfollow. Like
I mean, the thing is like. And a few people have never seen it. I'm not going to tell you to follow Andy and intrude on his life, but if you've never seen a little girl doing kettlebells in a princess dress, you don't know.
Oh, that was and even that one, like she picked up, it was like a 60, was like a 60, 70, it was like almost like a 70-pound kettlebell. It was almost, like double her body weight. And she's like deadlifting it. Like,
yeah. So, she's like Chris Steele's boy, right? You just know they're raised in the gym.
She talks about it like she's like there's the different attributes of both of them, but she's smaller, she's the younger sister, so that aggressiveness, that competitiveness is there,
right?
It's only been like in the last year that I've let them start watching wrestling.
Oh,
and so there's been a couple times they've they're quiet, they disappear, they come out, they've got their bathing suits on, and okay, daddy, introduce me as this, and they have their little wrestling matches, and there's
you must just roar watching that.
I love it. But like Ruby's a little spitfire. She's asked me about like learning wrestling and whatnot, so that I'd like both girls to. I think it's important for all kids. I think should have some exposure to some form of like martial arts, self-defense.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, like like the respect, the self-discipline, and just so not to say that you're gonna kick butt, but at least if you feel comfortable that in a skirmish or relative situation, you should be able to handle yourself or have some confidence that hey,
And people always think like, oh, you want to learn these fighting skills. And okay, ultimately, I guess you could boil it down to that, but really it comes down to self-confidence.
Yeah,
you know absolutely. What I mean? Like, my wife and I were talking a while ago, and I said, when I was 25 years old, I was 215 pounds. I was, 5'10", 215. I wasn't the biggest guy in the world, but because my background in wrestling, I was never afraid of anybody. I never picked fights. Like if you ask around the business, you never heard me getting in fights, but I was never afraid of anybody. Not because I thought I could fight anybody, because I just wasn't scared. And I think as a kid like me, that you can get that confidence from anything, you should do it.
I totally agree. And I'm a similar vein. I mean, I don't necessarily have the like an amateur wrestling background. I mean, like I was a hockey player all through their childhood into early adulthood. But
even at that, you learn a team environment, you learn working together. Like sport to me is so important.
I agree absolutely, and I think just having, like you mentioned, like the self-confidence, and just to me it's I'm always looking to de-escalate. I think this is why I kind of excelled with like the security in the nightclub scene, is I'm not looking for a fight. I want everything
Yeah.
to be smooth as possible, and that's I would like that just as much as, like, that type of skill just as much as, okay, well, this is the last resort. Someone's going to throw a punch. I'm going to block. I'm going to deflect, or if I'm going to take it, whatever. Like,
yeah. Well, you can see it coming. Like we had a wrestling coach. And I've talked about it on the program before, a guy called Clive Llewellyn. And when we were about 15, 16, we were getting that age where, we were starting to fight a little bit. We were starting to test out these skills we thought we had. And the first thing he did is he reminded us that these kids that we were going to school with, if we were getting a fight with a kid in the schoolyard, he essentially said, because I was a pipsqueak of a kid. And he says, I look at a guy, like my size, and that guy that's bullying you has no idea. So essentially at that point, you turn into the bully because that he's not going to be able to wrestle with you. You're going to take him down. You're going to, be a problem. So he said, you guys should always be walking away.
Yep.
Because it just doesn't. So, and he instilled us in that, but then he also taught us that, there's going to be a point where somebody won't let you walk away from a fight.
Yes.
So, you verbalize audibly that you do not want to fight. So everybody hears that. And at that point, when everybody knows you don't want to fight anymore, you defend yourself.
Yep.
Like he just kind of taught us to, don't back down, try to walk away, but there's going to be a point where you can't. So this is how you handle it,
I love it. And I agree with that. Absolutely. To me, it's always like, look, like I'm not going to throw the first punch, but I will do my damnedest to throw the last.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and even my mom, I mean, and I don't necessarily think you should be telling, your little girls this, but I was really, really young when my mom would tell us, like, do not go looking for trouble, but if trouble finds you, don't you ever back down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And sometimes that was advice taken poorly because you didn't realize somebody wasn't really pushing before you start pushing back.
Yeah. It's a case by case thing. And sometimes you have to go through those experiences to learn. I think it kind of, like, for me, the big summary of everything, and it's one of my favorite quotes. It's the, I would rather be a warrior walking through a garden than a gardener walking through a battlefield.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's perfect. All right, now let's talk enough about me. Let's talk about you.
All right, what you talk about?
Excuse me. You're a guy that I can't remember when I started to hear your name, but you were this kind of, I'd always, when I was, I think kind of the early 2000s when I was with like WCEW was here in Calgary for a minute, and I'd left Stampede and I was hearing about this fucking guy, Andy Anderson. And I remember somebody told me that, like, you guys would get along real well. You actually work the same style. And it was funny because we didn't have YouTube then. I didn't read a lot of dirt sheets. So I was like, who the hell is this Andy Anderson? And literally I'd always heard your name. Like, oh, he goes to Puerto Rico. He's a really good worker. He works just like you, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Like, who the hell is this guy? So then I take some time off from PWA and I come back, and I hated the booker. So I left and came back again. And I come back and you're there.
Yep.
And man, you were such a breath of fresh air in that locker room. Because, well, here's the thing, man, and this is where I give respect. I wrestled for a long time, and I wrestled in a lot of matches, and I wrestled with a lot of good guys that had good psychology and could teach me. Yep. But I never went and did what you did. So it was something I always gave you kind of that extra level of respect, because I was never willing to take that chance. And it was something that I admire and respect about what you did. And then when I was preparing for this, I'll watch your matches when you post them. But when I was preparing for this, I started kind of looking at your wrestling bios. And holy shit, did you hold a lot of championships? Like, you were a champion everywhere you went.
Which is funny, because to me, it's like, I always thought, like, man, like, I probably lost a lot more than I won, but it's one of the, like, I don't know. Maybe I did, but whatever. It's one of those things, the 2020 hindsight, like, when you're in that time frame, like, I'm sure you could probably say the same thing for like 15, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, if I knew now, if I knew then what I knew now, I could have been even that much more productive, even that much more better, because just at the time and the experience and the especially the business sense, where, like, and I mean, back then I was, I had ideas, but I was still, hey, whatever you want to do, man, that's cool, like this and that.
Yeah, I was never worried about getting my shit in. I was never worried about really I'll get over it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. And I mean, and there is still time. I mean, we can list off guys that we've encountered over the past 20 years that like I've had this stuff where it's like, okay, well, I want to do a ton of stuff. And because I mean, for me, my kind of prime wrestling days, it was like the Benoit, Guerrero, Malenko, Jericho.
Right.
That was like kind of like where like with my style, because not the biggest guys, right? And
Yeah.
at the
Well, those
time,
guys were just, I mean, from being from Calgary, I grew up watching the Benoits
Right.
and those guys, right?
Yep.
The Owens, but those guys, when I started to break in, those guys were all just starting to blow up. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That was a good time.
It was good. It was also, to me, I look back, I mean, and kind of, I think where my peak was around like the 2002, 2003. That was also the time, like it was like WWE was on fire.
Yeah.
That, you know, and I mean, the smaller guys were getting their due, but it still wasn't blown wide open. There wasn't a lot of
glass
space.
ceiling hadn't been broken yet.
Yeah. So it's, you know, I would have the talks with Dr. Tom or Kevin Kelly, and a couple times with Bruce Prichard, and it's like, yeah, like just keep doing what you're doing. Like, same thing everybody hears. It's like, we got nothing for you right now. Just keep doing what you're doing. Like, it's getting better. It's getting better. And it just, you know, you send in ideas, and just it was the timing was tough, but
we broke in at a really weird time. We really did.
Oh,
like
absolutely.
I didn't realize, like, I'd kind of got in, and I was, I'm sure you're familiar with guys like Ken Johnson, Jason Anderson.
Right.
You know, so I got to travel with those guys a bit, and I kind of learned from them, okay, I'm probably going to do 10 years in this before I start really doing anything.
Yeah.
You know, and at that 10-year mark, the only thing around was WWE. New Japan was doing jack shit. You know what I mean? It was kind of like, okay, at 10 years in, I realized like this is a hobby, or I can go wrestle in England for 50 pounds a day.
Yeah.
You know, so at that point, it became a hobby.
Yeah. Yeah. See, and I think at some point, I can't remember if it was the 50 pounds, but I know I was doing the England thing at one point too. But I had it set where I did it like, it was like every 2 years.
Okay.
It was like, let's evaluate. So when I first decided I was going to get into it, so that would have been like spring '96.
Okay.
And it's funny because at the time I was living in Edmonton, but I'm originally from Winnipeg. So that's where some of it, for some of the Alberta, Manitoba stuff, like some guys get like, well, you're in Alberta, but like you didn't like train with the heart. And you didn't.
I was confused today because you were always an Edmonton guy, and I looked at your bio. I was like, oh, he's from Edmonton. Oh, Winnipeg, yuck.
Yeah. So no. So I was born. I was born in Winnipeg, and then we moved here. I think I was like 10 or 11 years old.
Okay.
So I had already been like a wrestling fan for 5 years at that point. So
and you got that good AWA stuff.
Exactly. So to me, like, I didn't get Stampede till I came here. So that was kind of like mid-late 80s.
Okay.
So I mean,
now see, and you're one of the few guys that, sorry, I'm cutting you off here, but
you're
one of the few guys I knew that got to see both, right? Because most people, you were either raised watching AWA or WWE out east, or Stampede in the west. So like, did you find one better than the other? Like, is there something, or was it just simply you just loved it all?
I just loved it all.
Okay.
As like a 10, 11, 12-year-old. I was just, it was something else. I mean, my first exposure was AWA. So Winnipeg, it was like every Saturday night, 6:00 p.m. You know, was watching it. That was Nick Bockwinkel, Baron Von Raschke, the High Flyers, Ken Patera, Sheik Adnan Al-Kaisi, like Rock and Roll Buck Zumhoff, like, you know, all the guys I saw, like the early, like the Road Warriors, the Fabulous Ones.
Just listed off a Hall of Fame of guys right there.
Right? Like, it was still like Hulk was the incredible Hulk Hogan before he got taken away. Right. You know, getting to see Andre, saw Stan Hansen, Bruiser Brody, King Kong Bundy was Boom Boom Bundy, saw Kurt Hennig, Scott Hall, like all of that, Jimmy Garvin and Precious, because they were feuding with Rick Martel when he was the AWA champ. So I was like, I got to see the who's who then, and then coming to Stampede and not really knowing, but I don't know. Were you a wrestling magazine guy too?
No, man. Honestly, I'm a weird guy that way. Like like at that time I would buy like Hit Parader magazine. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I would buy like, and it sounds weird, but like, when I was 13, 14, I was buying like, you'd never know it by looking at me now, but that's when I was buying like Muscle and Fitness and Flex magazine and stuff, and just starting to lift weights in that. Like people are like, what's the first book you ever fully read? Like adult book. My first book I ever read, I was in grade 8. Arnold Schwarzenegger Encyclopedia of a Bodybuilder.
Yeah. I have one of those. Yeah, I think I still have it actually. See,
Yeah,
okay,
I found it the other day in one of my boxes in the garage.
it's timeless.
It is.
At some point, like I started getting the wrestling magazines, and I don't know if that evolved from getting programs at the show, but like I mean, like I refer to them as the history books, and that was like I still at my mom and dad's place, literally plastic bins of like the entire pro wrestling, like Pro Wrestling Illustrated, The Wrestler, Inside Wrestling, Wrestling 86, Wrestling 87, WWF, like whatever I could get my hands on.
You had all that shit.
Yeah. But I mean, like you said, like no internet. So it was just whatever I could get my hands on. I always wanted more. I was like, oh, this wrestling's this. It was just, I wanted wrestling.
Right.
So coming to Edmonton, it's like, oh man, like, you're looking around and we didn't have all the cable stations that we do now. And it's like, okay, well, I find the Stampede stuff. Okay, cool. Like this is good. It's a different style. I'd say it's a little bit, I mean, and this is all still right around WrestleMania, but still, I mean, going to the AWA shows, it was still, all the lights were off except the lights over the ring.
Yeah, that one light.
Yeah, and like very few, like the Road Warriors had entrance music. I don't remember if anybody else did, but very few did. And then so Stampede, seeing it from the corral, it, and I say this respectfully, not because there's nothing bad. It's just a bit of a grittier look because you wouldn't see a lot.
Yeah, the production wasn't there.
Yeah,
that's fair to say.
Yeah,
and
so. But it didn't matter. So you get, you see the Owen Hart, Ben Bassarat, Muck and Sing, Karachi Vice, Via Kong Express. It was the same thing. Like, although I didn't get like the heyday of Stampede, the time that I kind of came into it, I still, like getting the Young O and getting Hiro Hase, getting Kichi Yamada, Steve DeSalvo coming through. So then, that kind of,
well, you got the Ted Arcidi, right? Like
Ted Arcidi, Bill Kazmaier when he was
man,
in.
there were some freaks.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
Lethal Larry Cameron could work.
Yes,
right?
Lethal Larry Cameron.
Yeah.
And then
Pillman was there then.
Like, yeah, because it was Bad Company and all those guys. So I still got a lot.
And again, kind of a Hall of Fame roster of guys.
Yeah, and then for the time there when the Bulldogs came back.
Yeah. When you start factoring in the legends, right? Like you factor in the what I call the journeyman, right? The Jerry Morrows and the Gamma Sings and those guys that were always your Cuban Assassins that were always your
the regulars.
They were always your top foils. Those guys were always your top heels. Those three guys in Muck and Sing.
And they were great. I mean, and I never got to meet Muckin, but like I got to work and travel with Jerry, which was interesting, entertaining, scary. Educational, same thing. I get to do a little bit with Gamma. I never got to do anything with Cuban Assassin though.
Is that right?
Which, was just but I'm trying to think of who else from Stampede. But anywhere along the way, like as you get to encounter guys, it's just awesome. Like to think that 12-year-old Andy's going to what the heck, the Expo Center, the Agricom in Edmonton. On the Saturday night to watch the show, and then 10, 15 years later, it's like you're working with these guys. No different than
in the Agricom.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't even in the Agricom, but whether it was out like for Tony Condello out on a tour somewhere or somewhere, Saskatchewan, it didn't matter. It's like I guess like for any sport, right? Like if you're a hockey player and then you go in and you're playing a shift and it's like, holy crap, man, like there's like Gretzky or Messier, McDavid, Crosby, whoever. It's like,
you're sitting there with an all-star roster.
Yeah, it's surreal.
Yeah. Well, so I remember you'd hang out at the Hard House and I almost became a little bit jaded, I think, because we were there at a time. Jim had taken some time off. Davey was around the house all the time. We were coaching Harry wrestling, so we knew Davey pretty well.
Yeah.
And then Jim would come to the dungeon and Davey would come to the dungeon on Wednesday nights and work out with us. And you got so all of a sudden you start meeting these big guys like, whatever, man. It was kind of, but it was never like that. I was always, and to tell you this day, and I don't want to admit this, I'm still fucking nervous around Jerry Morrow. I don't know why. And I don't know why. Like Gamma, I'm very relaxed. QB, sweetheart of a guy. I don't know why it is. Jerry, I'm always a little bit tense around Jerry.
I'll give you a couple short little Jerry stories that I've encountered, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think the one thing, and this is just to kind of reconfirm what I'm sure everybody else has ever told about a Jerry Morrow story, is he can be very difficult to understand.
Yeah.
And, so it's one thing when you're backstage, you're on the road, you're hanging out, whatever. When he's calling stuff in the ring, no idea.
And that's the Cuban assassin as well. Like, you have to, if he shoots you off the ropes, you better be able to read body language.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. There was one tour. So I got to do some tours for Tony Candello. There was one, and this is a fun little story. So I was back in Edmonton, and I had to take the Greyhound to Calgary. I got picked up at the Greyhound station in Calgary by Bad News Alan.
Oh man.
Who took me to his place. We were just there for like a few minutes to get whatever. And then then we had to go pick up Jerry.
And was that the first time you'd met News?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
He's an intense personality.
Yes, he was very cool. He was
super nice guy.
Yes. But even then, like just like we talked earlier about, the knowledge, it's like, okay, well, the judo background, everything at that point, because he was pretty much done working. The respect was there for him. So it's I'm not messing around. It was, and I'm pretty much a yes sir kind of guy anyways.
Right.
So the respect was already there. So that was fine. We picked up Jerry, and then it was getting Adam, Jay, so Edge and Christian, because they hadn't signed yet, and Glenn Kulka, because he was training.
Oh, the Kulka Maniac.
Yes. Yeah. So, and it was all of us in a minivan going.
Oh, I forgot he was in the WWE for a while.
Yeah, because he was in the development system, and he was working at Brett's house, right? He was training at Brett's house with Adam and Jay and those guys.
Yeah.
So we were going back. At one point, Jerry's driving, and what was TLC comes on, and I'm not even going to try and do the accent, but hearing him sing "Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls."
Oh no.
Unreal.
I would have to pay money. I wish there was phone footage.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it was like, cell phones weren't like they are now. So like we had a cell phone, would just be able to record it. Like it was. So that was something that was great. So anyways, we get to Winnipeg, and somewhere in here we were doing a show. It was like an outdoor show outside Pony Corral. That's what it was. And I was working Jerry. And I don't know what happened in the mat. Like, we had whatever we had. Like, we didn't have much. It's okay, just go listen. And I think we were just having the miscommunication. And it's like he went and like he got. I'm a little cloudy on this. It was either he pulled out the sledgehammer or he pulled out the chair. And then I was like, I'm greenhorn here, right? Like I've been in the business like year and a half. I was getting scared out of my mind. So whatever it was, I think he pulled out the sledgehammer, and I think I pulled out the chair. And it was like a standoff, because I didn't know what the heck was going on. It's like, I don't know, is he working or
is he really gonna hit me with the hammer?
It's like I'm scared for my life.
Oh man.
So anyways, I think the ref eventually got to kind of calm down. We got back in, we had the match, and we I got back in, and we had like a camper or something to change in, and Adam and Jay were there, or it was just Jay. And I went back, and I was crying. Like I felt like I felt so bad, because it's like, performance wise, you want to perform well.
Yeah.
And it's tough because the match sucked, and you feel bad, and
you just want to impress those guys.
Yeah. You want to impress the guys. You want everything to work well.
Yeah.
And if the communication breakdown, so that was a bit of a low point. So it was what it was, and obviously I survived. But
did he chirp you at all? Because he was working a buddy of mine one time, and it was the first time they'd worked together. And
yeah,
I remember it was our first actual tour. Like, we'd worked kind of 5 spot shows, and then we worked 10 shots in 11 nights on this first little tour around Calgary. And they went over, and for whatever reason, I don't know why I was standing at ringside. Like, I don't know who I was managing or who I was second, but I was literally
you were there.
Yeah, but I was, I was standing right at the ring apron, and they go into the first spot, and the guy Jerry's working botches the spot.
Yeah.
It's not a big botch, but it's a botch.
Yep.
Jerry turns around and he says something to the guy, and I have no idea what he said. I couldn't understand it. But then I hear him, and he's kind of half-ass laughing. When he turns, he looks at the ref, and he goes, "That's it. He already fucked up one spot."
He very may well have. I don't know. I think that I think that may have been the one and only time we worked. So
Right.
it might have been, I don't want to work with this greenhorn ever again,
Yeah.
which
Well, he was
I wouldn't have
laughing like
blamed
he had fun with it, but it was really
Yeah.
funny. He just looked right at the ref, and the whole crowd could hear. Like, he already fucked up one spot.
Oh man, that's yeah. So
There was
that's
one time he scared us, actually. Me and so, we were smoking a joint after a show, and he's seen us.
Yeah.
And the next show, he comes up to us and he says, "The next time you motherfuckers are smoking a joint and you don't invite me, I'm gonna kill you all." And he was laughing, right? Like he was joking, but
Yeah.
we're like, "Oh
Yeah.
fuck, okay." So that night, of course, we we better go smoke a joint then if Jerry's
Yeah.
So we go and we roll this joint. We like, make it extra big because we're sure Jerry's coming with, and we're like, "Hey Jerry, you
Yeah.
want to smoke a joint?" He's like, "I don't smoke that shit." It's like, oh man.
that's awesome.
Yeah, that was a good
Oh.
rip because legit we were just like, oh shit, man.
Yeah, we're gonna die if we don't invite him.
Yeah, we thought we disrespected one of the vets, right? Like, oh geez,
Oh.
we better get on Jerry's. Same with if you traveled with QB, you
Yeah.
did not try and leave the town before you got a 6-pack in his hand.
Wow.
Yeah, here's
Just,
I don't know if I should tell this story because it's kind of off color, and I don't know how many people kind of outside the territory
Right.
or outside the business don't know it, but I think it's hilarious.
Okay.
So when I broke in, if you know Cuban Assassin is maybe 5'7", 5'8". He's not the tallest
right.
guy.
Yeah.
I'm thick, but
Yes.
I'd heard these legendary stories, and this is going to gross some people out. If you get grossed out easy, fast forward about the next minute and a half.
I'm already wondering if this is what I'm thinking it is. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I'd heard the Cuban Assassin could pee across a 2-lane highway.
Yes.
So
Ah.
now, of course, you're like, what? First of all, who even tries to do that?
Yes.
But anyways, so then fast forward, I'm working some shows, and it was at a time I actually worked a couple of house shows with Cuban Assassin, who hit my head so hard off a table one night, I sort of brought a tear to my eye. So I'm late. I'm in the van. I fall asleep. We're driving along, and it's a clear summer night. Like there's supposed to be no weather, and the van stops, and I kind of wake up, and I'm like, why are we stopped? What the hell's going on? And I look, and the windshield's wet, and I'm like, why is? And we were driving in a van, like a 15-passenger van.
Yeah.
And I look, and I realize that QB's standing on the passenger side of the van, peeing up to the top corner of the driver's side of the windshield. I'll be honest, I heaved when I realized he was peeing on the van. But it was hilarious.
And that's I think that's what I had heard is that he was able to pee like over a truck or over a van. I didn't hear a highway. It was like he could like pee over a truck.
Okay. Yeah.
So it just he had that trajectory. That's the main part of the story.
Yeah, so if you ever wonder that's how strong Cuban's bladder was, imagine how tough he just was.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a wildcat. Yeah, he's one of my favorite stories about QB. And you know the Highlander, right?
Yep.
So we were one of our first real tours were actually gone away. This is one of the first times we had gone for 2 weeks, hotel rooms, the whole deal.
Right.
So me and this guy called Ruffy Silverstein were going out for dinner or something. I don't know why, maybe it was a night off, but we go to get the Highlander, and he's rooming with QB, and we walk into the room, and he's teaching, but he's ultimately stretching the Highlander, and they're both in their underwear because they just had a shower. So of course we walk in and we're like, hey, what's going on, boys? I could be wrong, but I don't see QB anymore, so I can tell the story. But I'm sure QB told us if we tell anybody we saw that, he would kill us.
It's kind of like the movie The Naked Gun when Leslie Nielsen's trying to get the Emperor stuff or whatever, or not the Emperor, the umpire, or Enrico Palazzo, and the guy walks in and he sees the door. He sees him kind of like, oh, sorry, fellas. Just close the door and back out.
Yeah, we didn't do that. We just stood there and started laughing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because I originally went. So my training, my origins are actually back in Winnipeg.
And you trained with Vance, Nevada, right? Is that?
Yes, Vance was the one that broke me in. So it's like he was kind of like the primary one, and then Robbie Royce kind of had a hand in there as well. And then there was some of the other guys. Like we would just, whoever was there, you'd work with. But kind of like Vance was kind of the primary, and Royce was secondary. But part of it for me when I was in university at the time, and the internet was still its infancy. It was the World Wide Web.
Yeah, you were still calling it the web. Yeah, it was still the web.
Yeah, the World Wide Web. And so I was looking around trying to like figure out like, okay, well, if I want to try and do this, like I need to train. And so I had somehow Mark Miro Johnny B. Bad from WCW days and WWE. He'd made himself quite available on the web at the time. So he had like his email address or whatever. And
Really?
so I had emailed him saying, kind of giving him a little bit of background and saying like, hey, like I'm interested, like, what would you suggest? What would you recommend? And at the time, he originally recommended I get in touch with Dean Malenko because Malenko had a school in Florida, I think in Tampa.
Right.
So he gave me Dean Malenko's phone number. So I called Dean and spoke to him. And whatever it was like a couple grand to train. And then plus, you still like, and I was poor university student. So especially US dollars.
Yeah,
I didn't have it. So it's like, okay, well, cause I asked him like, was there some way that, I can do something like where I can like work to make some money or whatever? He's like, oh, you kind of got to do it on your own. I'm like, well,
yeah. See ya.
Yeah. And then it's like, I knew like around Calgary, like the Hearts, like they were charging was like 1,500 or $2,000 or something like that. And I'm like, I'm looking elsewhere. So I was like, somehow I kind of got back looking at Winnipeg and I got in touch with a gentleman named Terry Mahalik, who was a photographer out of Winnipeg.
Okay.
And he was like, oh, well, you could talk to like Tony Condello, you can talk to Vern May. And I think he might have listed somebody else. He said, Condello charges a fair amount. Vern, might be a little more workable. So I went and I got in touch with Vern and kind of, again, same thing. Like, this is my spiel. I'm interested. And he's like, okay. He says, well, like if you come back here, we can kind of figure things out as we go along.
Okay.
Like, okay, well, yeah. And so because I'm originally from Winnipeg and I had some family, I was like, okay, I can go back there. I got a place to stay. I don't have to worry about rent.
Yeah, expenses drop a huge number.
Exactly. And it's like, okay, well, I can pick up work. So that's what I ended up doing. So I moved back to Winnipeg, started training there. And it was like, I was working at a gym. I was doing security at a nightclub and that was it. And then that was,
yeah.
I think I would train and then, people can say do whatever. I think it was April. I think it was like after about 2 or 3 months, I had my first match.
Okay.
To say it was awful would be an upgrade.
I think that's most of us though, man. Don't be too hard on yourself. I remember thinking my first match was awesome and I watched it about 5 years later and it was dog shit.
Well, I knew as it was happening. So, but here's why. And so my first match was against Robbie Royce. He was like one of the top baby faces. And so they had me positioned in as a heel, but I wore a mask and full gear to kind of cover me up. And because it was just follow and listen, it's like whatever we had, like I wasn't really kind of doing much as a heel. It's like I would do something that I kind of hang back. So I wasn't working the crowd. I wasn't really getting the heat on him. I would do something and kind of back off. And we were losing the people. And I think at one point he kind of just like, changed the finish and he went to do something. And I think I even said to him, like, is this the finish? And he's like, yep. Like, you just got the shoulders down.
Yep.
So, but then like the second, I think after that, my second or third one, I think it was, I don't know if it was like part of like a multi-person tag and then it was like in a battle royal and stuff. And I picked up, it was one of those things where I guess I had a bit of like the natural, I don't say it, but I got it.
Yeah.
In this, being a fan, like, like for almost like a lifelong fan. And even as a
people
fan,
can say this, sometimes guys can pick it up, but really and truly, I believe you can tell pretty quick a guy gets it or he doesn't.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean he'll never be a good worker. It's just a different thing.
Yep. Yeah. And even like, and it's, I can't even talk about it now compared to like our time, but because things were protected, but if you're able to pick up on the nuances and the subtleties that most would, and it's like, okay, well, this doesn't, the suspension of disbelief, this doesn't necessarily make sense. Okay, well, how do you make this work? Okay, well, this has to work because of this. And then, you can kind of fit pieces together.
Well, you have to work out the psychology, right?
And that's what it is. And then you can kind of piece stuff together where nowadays it's all, moves and stuff first. It was, okay, well, to kind of figure out the pieces to tell the story, at least if you're limited in what you do, you still know the point you need to get from point A to point B and the story that you need to tell in between.
Yeah.
And so that's where that's where you just had to get the in-ring experience. So I got into the ring maybe a little bit, I don't know if earlier than I should, but I kind of got it as we went along. And the one thing for me, even back then, I knew right off the get-go, it was like, okay, well, if I want to get anywhere, you got to get out of Winnipeg, you got to get out of Canada.
Right.
And that's, I made that clear to Vance from the get-go. I said, when there's an opportunity, when you feel that I'm ready enough, and I was one of those guys, I had a car. So I said, like, hey, let's, if we can do this. And so let's see, I started training in April, and then in, I think, August of 96, Vance and I did our first kind of like our trip down into the States. We went for a couple of weeks.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. And like he had arranged some bookings for us in advance, and the other ones he's like, okay, like, and again, because internet's not what it was, and you didn't have access to every single show. So Vance did the legwork, and it's like, okay, well, we can appear on this show here, we can appear on this show here. There's a show here, we can show up and see if they'll use us, even if they'll just give us gas money or whatever. And that's what we did. We went for 2 weeks. I don't know, I think we worked like 7 or 8 shots through kind of like Missouri and Tennessee. I at the time, the USWA was still running out of Memphis.
Okay.
And somewhere, I think it was at Louisville Gardens in Louisville. He and Vance and I showed up because I think he had talked to Randy Hales, who was one of the bookers.
Right.
And we didn't get to do anything in Louisville, but Bert Prentice, who also, because he was like managing and then kind of helping as well, he was one that told us, show up Saturday at the Memphis TV studios and maybe we'll use you guys.
Okay.
So we showed up Memphis TV, WMC, Saturday morning. It's institution there. And they decided to use me. And I worked Brian Christopher. It was, I think, my 12th match.
Really?
Live TV.
Holy shit.
And it was a non-title match. And so I'm like, we were in the studio area, and there's kind of like the cafeteria area, kind of like big space where the guys kind of sit and chat. And so he's kind of talking. I was like, yeah, he's like how long everybody's like, how long you been working? I said, well, this is like my 12th match. And he's like, his eyes like bugged out. Like, oh, and I remember like, no, like, no, don't worry. Like I can follow. I can, just
okay.
leave me, I'll follow. And he's like, okay, man, like, come on. He's like, we went like, and I don't know why we were kayfabing, but whatever. So it's like, we went, he's like, come on, we went to the bathroom, and like, he's like, okay, well, we'll do this and this, and, I'll give you this, so take this. And then I said something about doing a moonsault. And at the time, like the moonsault and the Hurricane Ranas, these were still like big high spot, like right. Like a lot of people were doing them.
Yeah,
they
were finishes.
Yeah. So he's like, you can do that? And I was like, yeah. Well, and when me saying, yeah, I can do that was on this road trip of Vance and I, it's like I was practicing it in the pools where we're so I'm off the diving board, I'm working on backflips off the edge of the pool, I'm not landing on the ring, I'm not doing anything but hitting the water. But he's like, you can do that? I'm like, yeah, I mean, you told me,
sure.
You could pull a rabbit out of your ass on live. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you need? You just tell me what
just tell me, I'll do it. And so it's like, okay, well, it's like, well, we'll do that. Then it's like, you go do this, you go for the moonsault, I'll move, and then I'll hit the finish. And that it's like, okay, cool. So we did the match, and I was a heel. So this time I was a little more like, and I think it was like Lawler and Bert, like they were pushing. It was like, like really like work the people, because they had the studio audience. So this was still relatively new, because at this point I'd been all babyface, right? Because typically the new guys come in, they're the baby faces, so that the heels can lead. And right.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I did well enough, and we went through, didn't screw anything up. The only screw up of the match. So I went up for the moonsault, and again, keep in mind, relatively new. So when I went to the maneuver, not just me, but when I went to do it, instead of rolling out of the way, Brian sat up.
Oh shit!
So we kind of like knocked. Like not like hard in the hip, but like I still like made contact with him.
Right. And
whatever, like went down. I think he sold it briefly, and I can't remember if he used the super kick as a finish or kind of like the face thing.
Skull crushing finale.
Yeah, skull crushing finale thing. So whatever, we did that, and sold, got to the back, and he's like, hey man, that was really good. And he apologized. He's like, I shouldn't have sat up. He says, I should have rolled in. He said, just not used to kind of doing that kind of thing.
Wow.
So, yeah, exactly. So that was cool. The other funny thing with that, for a little story there, at the time, a lot of so it was like Wolfie D was there, Jamie Dundee, Flash Flanagan, Superstar Bill Dundee, Lawler was there, Road Dogg. I don't think he was Road Dogg yet, but like Jesse James was there,
right?
And Sid Vicious was there. And it was at one point Sid Vicious, one of the announcers, Corey Macklin, he was kind of back there where they're saying, okay, like, what's your name? It's like, okay, like at the time, so when I broke in, I wasn't Andy Anderson off the get-go. I was christened in as JT Atlas.
And what's up with that name?
So, so there, and there's the reason why. I can't remember if it was just strictly Vance or if it was a couple of them, but the JT is just because really around the Winnipeg area, there was like nobody really had any like a name like with the initials.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
it was just like JT. So it didn't really mean anything. Eventually, I think we kind of joked around that it meant like jumping tiger,
Right.
but it didn't. Yeah, there was nothing to it. And then Atlas, it was just because at the time I was one of the better built guys.
Oh, gotcha.
So,
Okay.
Charles Atlas.
Yeah,
so
you
JT
bet.
Atlas. So they're sitting there, and I mean, again, I'm being a good rookie. Even for Vance, who's been around, like we know, like we're just, we're quiet, we're minding our P's and Q's, ears open, mouth shut. And Sid Vicious, so he's like, oh, like JT Atlas, and he's, after I say it, and him and Corey Macklin starts talking, he's like, yeah, there's something missing. He's like, you need to be like JT Atlas the third. And he's like, and Macklin, like, yeah, that's it. So that's, if you go back in the match, it's like I'm announced as JT Atlas the third, and it was Sid Vicious who anointed me as JT Atlas.
That's hilarious.
Just other than just that JT Atlas was missing something, and it needed the third.
That's so funny, man.
So yeah, so we did that, and then
tell me though, was he not, for a guy that could be such a monster heel, was he not one of the nicest guys you met in the business?
You know what? There's a lot of times where guys where you talk about like, oh, so there's a few that have been jerks and asses, but
yeah,
the couple times I was around him, he was cool.
Yeah, like I met him once, and he like walked over and went out of his way to be polite and nice, and it was, you know what I mean? I was really impressed.
We can segue all over the story. You know who I had that happen with, that to me was one of the coolest things, especially looking back now. 2002, I in a match in Puerto Rico, tables, ladders, chairs versus Super Crazy. I broke my collarbone in a match.
Oh,
didn't know it.
Is this the one you had highlights of the other day?
Yes, the popped up.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So I broke the collarbone. Didn't know I was going to WWE camp 2 weeks later.
Oh shoot.
Yeah, I went to the camp. It wasn't until I was in camp that at one point where I was complaining about the pain that they sent me to the doctor who x-rayed me. And that's where I found out that it was actually broken. So I had showed up at WWE camp with like a broken collarbone.
Yeah. See you, kid.
Yeah, well, they let me hang around, because what had happened was, like, for collarbones, usually when they break, you get like a crack or whatever. But my bone broke completely in two and then was resting like this.
Oh.
So I still had some movement and mobility. It was just really painful.
Oh, that's actually making my mouth water right
So that's what was kind of, that's like, okay, well, it just, from that match, it was like the 2 weeks. It was like I had to go easy on training and whatever. And it was WWE camp. This was like, I think the second one that I was going to. So it was there I found out, okay, broke the collarbone, whatever. So that was done. Flew back to Puerto Rico. And then it's like, okay, a couple days later, it's like then I was flying back to Edmonton to get checked by my doctor, figure out if I needed surgery, whatever, and take time off. About a month later, WWE was coming through. So they did, and at the time, I was really good buddies with D'Lo Brown.
Okay.
Because D'Lo would come, it was like D'Lo, Chaz, and Pete Gass from the Mean Street Posse.
Yeah, you bet.
They all got assigned to Puerto Rico, because at one point IWA Puerto Rico was sort of like developmental territory.
Right. Give the guys a place to work, but keep them out of the States.
Yeah, just because it was like, Victor Quinones, who was kind of the one that owned it, because he was working with WWE with like the Super Astros and stuff, and then Savio and Miguel, like the Break was pretty much most of those guys. So that was all the connection. So D'Lo and I were pretty good buddies. So at this point, he was back on the main roster. I had come home, and it's like, okay, well, they were doing like the Calgary shot. I think it was Calgary Saturday, Red Deer Sunday, Raw Monday. That's what it was. So D'Lo, so I said to D'Lo, look, well, I'll meet you in Red Deer. It's like, don't worry about getting a car. Like, if you can drive with somebody from Calgary to Red Deer, I'll come pick you up. and then I could take you to your hotel. Once you get to Edmonton, we can hang out. And of course, I just wanted to go to the show as well and
Right.
be around the guys. And I knew at this point, I knew quite a few of the guys. So I drive down to Red Deer, and I'm backstage, and D'Lo's introducing me. I'm seeing some of the familiar faces, introducing me. And at one point, he's like, we're kind of standing there. He's like, oh, so hang on a second. He says, hey, Brock, come on over here. So Brock Lesnar.
Right.
He's like, hey, this is my buddy Andy. He's like, he's been in the business for quite some time. He's wrestled in Puerto Rico. He's wrestled in Japan. And Brock's like, hey, man. He's like, sticks out his hand. Like, nice to meet you. And I was like, cool.
When he would still do that, apparently.
And when he would. But just the fact that even then, the fact that, again.
From what you hear about his reputation, that's not what you'd expect.
Right. I mean, especially even then. And again, like, I'm technically more of a veteran in the wrestling business than he is.
Right.
But obviously, he's done this a little more even at that point than I have. But it was just to me, it was just cool that something like that, like I again, like a younger guy.
Yeah.
And if it was because of the association of D'Lo, whatever, but he didn't have to. He could have just been like, hey man, like whatever. But he came over. He made a point of coming over, shaking my hand, hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you.
Yeah. That's cool. I met now I'm just sort of like name dropping, just trying one up.
Oh, dude, if we can name drop back and forth, I got all kinds of fun stories.
Well,
if you want to do that.
Probably the weirdest thing was when Stone Cold Steve Austin first became Stone Cold, when he went from the ringmaster. I remember telling my friends, I took a lot of like psychology courses and stuff. I wanted to be a counselor, right? So I kind of understand how group dynamics and stuff work. So as I'm watching Stone Cold, I'm like, this guy's gonna be the biggest thing. And my roommate, my brother at the time, were like, what are you talking about? I was like, what 16-year-old kid who was all watching wrestling doesn't want to tell their boss to fuck off? I was like, this guy's gonna be the biggest thing. Yeah. And I don't think we'd started training yet, because I didn't start training. I started training like November 96.
Okay.
So I wish I could remember exactly, but we were at a house show, because we went to a house show before we actually started training.
Yeah.
When there was a house show that
was he working Savio?
I honestly can't even remember. What I remember most is Harry and TJ, Teddy Hart, and their friend Andrew Karnick. I mean, I think Ted was the old man at like 16. Harry was like, they get to have their match.
Yeah.
And they had a match at the Saddle Dome. So we were at that show, and that's probably the only reason we were there, is because the kids were wrestling and we coached them amateur wrestling. Yeah. And we're kind of walking through the hall, and Stone Cold literally is leaning against a wall, drinking a Diet Coke, not a soul around him. No one's talking to him. I was just like, I kind of looked around. I was like, this is so weird. So the three of us went up and introduced ourselves to him, and he talked. He was, like, hey, what are you doing now? Blah, blah, blah. He's like, just grab a 6-pack, drive to the next town. Do you guys know how far that is? It's about 3 hours north, man. You'll be all right. Yeah. And then he's like, started asking us about hunting. And of course, we're all like, yeah, no, Safeway does our killing. I think he was about done with us at that point. But he was actually, again, he was a year later. If we would have tried that, we probably wouldn't even have seen him in the back.
Right.
It was really an interesting thing. Like, he's literally just leaning against the wall, drinking a Diet Coke. Nobody's even talking to him. Yeah.
That's been so much. And, it's one of those things. And I don't know. I think maybe this is the reason why by and by, as I got a little more time in the business, I wasn't really, say, starstruck or intimidated by anybody, because it was just like, at the end of the day, you're just like, man, like, guys just wearing Nikes backstage, just like the rest of us, or just, the whole Oilers put their pants on one leg at a time.
Yeah, I
like,
love Stone Cold Steve Austin, but I will not be intimidated by a guy that wears jorts. Let's just be clear about that.
Hey, he helped set a movement, because I was wearing them too. So
Cena made a whole living out of that,
right? So I mean, I got my ass kicked by Austin on TV in May of '98 on an episode of Monday Night Raw.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes, and that was I was there, and I mean, there's a story behind that, but anyways, the meat of the story. Myself and another buddy, we showed up backstage at Raw, and this is kind of like my first time around meeting Victor Quinones. And he's like, "Hey, we got something for you." And of course, like, you're hoping to, like, man, like, oh, I want to work a dark match, because at the time, that's when they were doing like the dark matches for.
Yeah, that's when you were getting a look.
Yeah, and he's like, no, it says, I think it was like, go see, it was like Tony Garea or somebody, because they're going to use you as a security guard. Like, okay, whatever. Like, I don't care. Like, again, like, yes, sir. You know,
Yeah. Thank
pull a
you.
rabbit out of my ass.
Yeah.
And so I think it was great that I went and saw. And so they said, okay, well, we're gonna do something here, and Vince McMahon's gonna be barring Steve Austin from coming into the arena, and you're gonna be the security guard that's gonna keep him out, but eventually he's gonna kick your ass, and this and that. I'm like, okay, like, whatever, cool.
That's awesome.
So they it was at the time. So I forget what it's called now. The Bridgestone Arena, is that what they call it in Nashville nowadays?
I couldn't tell you.
Whatever where the Predators play. At the time, it was the Nashville Arena. Like, nobody had the rights.
It was before sponsored arena.
Yeah. Well, at least the one in Nashville. I mean, I think they had them, but whatever. So it was Nashville Arena. So they took me to the area where they have like the legit security guards. They found me an outfit that fit, and it was actually, so Steve was there. There was a camera guy, and Vince Russo was back then, because at the time he was one that was producing all the vignettes and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And so it's like an underground parkade for the arena. So it's like, okay, well, what we're gonna do is Austin's gonna pull up, and he's gonna come in, and you're gonna stop him from coming into the thing, or try to. So, and it was gonna be like a several, because a lot of these, even like nowadays, like most guys, when you're security or whatever, you get like the one segment and that's it. Yeah. But I think I ended up having about like 4 or 5 segments throughout the whole show.
Oh, that's so good, man.
Yeah, so
that's better than a match, quite frankly.
Right? Yeah. You get the airtime, the FaceTime. So the first thing is like he comes, and if anybody watching, listening, if you have the WWE Network, it's like May 1998. I think it's like the second or third week of May. Third week of May, I think, somewhere around there.
So I'm writing this down so I can look it up later.
Yeah. So anyways, we do and most of these, and this will kind of fall into the story. Most of these some of them are pre-tapes. So the first one is like Austin drive. They go like, oh, here's Steve Austin's here. Oh no. And they show him like walking. They have like the big bay door, and then there's like the normal like little person door, and I'm in the security thing. So I it's almost like John Candy in Vacation when the Griswolds show up. It's like Mr. McMahon, you buy the building, and so Austin is like, he's got his gear bag. I think he had like, he's driving. I think he's got like beers with him and stuff too. And he said, well, he says, I'm going to go back to my truck, have a couple Steve Weisers and think about this. And I want you to think we're going to do this the easy way or the hard way and whatever. So like, okay, I'm just doing what I'm told. And, so that segment ends, and
thank you, sir.
Whatever. Yeah. And then, so then they do the next one. They have us coming back, another segment in the show, and Austin's back again. I come out. I'm like, sorry, Mr. Austin. Like, I can't let you in. I can't let you in. Do the deal where I put my hand on to stop him. And like, oh yeah. And then it's like he puts his arm around me. We start to go for a little walk. He says, you think like Vince McMahon cares about all his employees, and it's funny because like there was no script, so everything was all ad lib too as we did this.
Dynamite.
And this is 98, so this is after the Montreal screw job.
Oh shit.
And so I'll tell you the story. It's funny because our mutual buddy Boris, that works for PWA, he knows the story and he loves it. But so my own little, it's like my own little inside Easter egg for this segment. But it's like he does the line. He says, like, do you think like Vince McMahon cares about you? And it's like, well, I'm sure Vince McMahon cares about all his employees. And that was like my own little thing about like, like for Brett. Didn't mean anything to anybody, but that was just my little thing. It's like sticking up for Brett in the Montreal screw job was like, yeah, it's like
that is
all
hilarious,
his employees.
Actually.
And then he takes me, and then he spins me around, and like he like throws me like right into the bay door, and then starts putting the boots to me and all this, and he picks up the walkie-talkie. He's like, breaker, we got a problem or something. Whatever, he's talking trash, and like tell Vince McMahon Steve Austin's looking for him. And he's like, I told you, you little son of a bitch. And so that was that one. So that was like another pre-tape, and so that's fine. I had both Howard Finkel and Hawk of the Road Warriors compliment me on my bumping.
That was nice. Yes, there you go.
So that was cool. So now they do now later on another segment. They've got me talking to the police, and we're walking down the hallway because he's assaulting me.
Right.
So now we're looking. Have you seen Stone Cold Steve Austin? Have you seen?
So now you're stooging him out to the cops.
Absolutely. Well, because he's not supposed to be in the building, right? So he's not
trespassing and assaulting staff.
Exactly. You
Come on,
understand.
Steve Austin.
So they have like Jim Ross, like, oh, there's that security guard. He's with some of Nashville's finest, and they're looking for Stone Cold. So, and it was just like a short little segment there. And then there's another one in the same episode. Jerry Lawler was sneaking Al Snow into the building to have a meeting with Vince.
Okay.
So the next segment, this is like segment like 4 now. There's a minivan, and Lawler's got Al Snow, but Al Snow's underneath a blanket.
Okay.
And so I was like, hey, like, is that Steve Austin? And he's like, hey, he's like calling me like Barney Fife or whatever, and making the, you want to have a look at yourself? It's like, yeah. And then so it's like I look under, and there's Al Snow. He's like making faces at me when I'm looking under, and I no, it's not Steve Austin. Go ahead. And it's like, okay, we continue looking, and then I think so those were all pre-tapes, and then I'm sitting by the monitors watching the show. And at some point, they decided that Austin was going to get caught. And this is how sometimes these shows get booked on the fly.
Sometimes,
so,
yeah.
Sometimes.
That time.
Yeah. Like he was like, Rooster, somebody finds like, hey, like you need to put that stuff on because we're going to do another one. We're doing it live. And it's like, okay, like whatever. So I'm rushing. I think I'm literally standing there, people are around, and I'm getting dressed, putting the security thing back on. So what happens and of course this all makes sense in the world of professional wrestling, not in the outside. So they had found Austin. They had him handcuffed in the back of the police car, but they were willing to let him go if he apologized to me.
Makes sense.
Right?
Just say you're sorry.
You shoplifted. Hey, look, man, I'm sorry. Oh, okay, we'll let you go.
Yeah. You killed the guy. You got to just say sorry.
I really didn't mean it. Oh, you sound so sincere.
Oh, you.
So it's like they do like a quick bump or whatever. They show Austin. It's like, oh, it's like they got Austin. He's in the police car or something. And then they come back from break, and so it's like segment like whatever, like with a bumper. So it's like 4 or 5 at this point. No, I wasn't in that one though. They just showed Austin. So now they finally show Austin. They pull him out. It's like, okay, we'll let you go. And he's, got the handcuff behind like this. And I'm standing there. It's like, if you apologize to this man, he's like, you want me to apologize? Like, I'll apologize. Like, I'm sorry you're so stupid. I'm sorry you don't know. He's going off that whole tirade. I'm sorry you're a loser. You're a jackass. And if you don't understand, they finally let him take the handcuffs off. Here's to you. He does a double flip. And the last thing you see is me just going like, and so that was like my whole thing with Austin. So that went on throughout that one episode.
So you were essentially a 2-hour Raw on your own.
Pretty much. I mean,
nice.
Like whatever the numbers did that day. Yeah. I mean, some people say, hey, that was the night Val Venus debuted on TV. But I really think it was me that really drove the ratings for that show.
I was going to say, I bet if we look back, there was a pop in the ratings that night.
Absolutely.
100%. And that's awesome though. What a cool story. The truth is, I had no idea you'd done that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, it's if you go back, and I have a little bit more, literally just a little bit more hair than I have now. I had the short buzz cut going on, but it was cool, and Austin was cool, and it was, and even at one point when we were doing the earlier stuff, I told him like I know we're out, I know we're back here and stuff, we're not in the ring, but if you want me to take a stunner, like I'll do whatever, like I don't care. He's like, oh man, like and he was like, no, he says, if I do that, I said, I'm gonna take the bump on my ass. He says, there's no way in hell I'm doing that. He says, I'm just gonna beat you up and that's it. Okay, like whatever. Like in retrospect, again, the hindsight, I'm like, man, it's like it would have been cool if he would have like take me, throw me into the back, on the bed in the pickup truck, and then if I'm getting up, he could have like got up on the truck and then like sat down and like right on the edge of the tailgate and like stunned me off of there.
Right,
and I could have bounced, and then then he could have did that, and then a little too late for thinking of that, but still, just again, it was everything was kind of ad lib. Hey, this is what we want to do, just like this, and so I just
it's funny because. I'm sitting here name dropping. Oh yeah, I know this guy. I met that guy. Like, yeah, I worked a whole Raw with Steve Austin. Thank you for coming out, everybody.
Good night. It's funny, even the name drop thing. And again, here name drop Boris, and I to listen, and he always loves to be name dropped, and it's like a joke with us.
Well, there's very few people in the wrestling business that I adore more than Boris.
Oh, I love him. He's awesome guy. He's an asset to the PWA, to the wrestling business. He's got a good mind.
So passionate. He is
yes,
so passionate.
Yes. So Boris, here's our 10 seconds of Boris. You're welcome. You owe me a Diet Pepsi.
Yeah, in case there wasn't a rainbow shining out your ass yet, Boris. We love you.
But that was, we do stuff like that where, it's like we do something like I would be talking and you like named, oh yeah, that reminds me of this time I did this with the Big Show. And he's like, oh yeah, hang on, you dropped this. You want it back? It's like, but even then,
there used to be a guy in Stampede that was bad for that. And again, like, I don't mean to name drop, but at the time we would go to the Heart House a lot for Sunday dinners.
For sure.
Right. So you would meet, you'd go up there, and I met Brett right after he'd recorded The Simpsons. So he was massive at that time as far as
nice.
So then you're sitting there and you're in the locker room with this guy that'd been around and done some things. I don't want to minimize it, but I also don't want to piss on him. So I'm not going to say his name. But I would actually joke like, oh, fuck, watch your toes, man. This guy's name dropping again. Like,
no, we'll keep going.
And then, you'd hear somebody like, hey, Jordy, didn't you just have like dinner with Brett Sunday night?
There you go.
And that was Brett. He just happened
but that's kind of the thing, like with Boris and I, and it's like, and because it's, again, like, guys like to do that, and that's fine, it's cool. But if someone's telling a story and they're all cool about it, cool. But if you get someone when they start to name drop, and it's like one of those things where if you're sitting there, it's like I could be sitting like this and you listen to the story, and like I'd look over and like I could see Boris, and it's like all right, it's almost like one-upsmanship. Hey, it's like, oh yeah, well I got to do this, or I got a tweet from so and so. We're gonna Hey Andy, what about that time you did that thing with Jeff Hardy? Oh yeah, well, Jeff Hardy and I were in this. And it's just, and it's like, even if nobody else kind of gets it, it was just like dude, like, that's cool, but just just
stop.
Yeah.
Well, and again, maybe somebody described Canadians, I think, as almost anti-celebrity, and I wonder if that's some of it for a lot of us.
That
like
could be.
Right after, I'm trying to think timeline. Corey Hirsch was Canada's goalie. I can't remember if they'd either just won like the World Juniors or got silver at the Olympics. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like he just got silver at some big tournament. And I've seen him in the bar in Northeast Calgary. And legit, this guy at the time was on top of the hockey world. Every Canadian has to know him, and nobody's bothering him. Do you know what I mean? Like, I walked by, tipped a beer to him, like, hey, brother. He tipped one back, and you keep walking. And I think there's guys that like that, and then there's guys that are going to go bother you for pictures and things like that. I don't know. I've never been that guy. Like, sometimes I wish I was more that guy, because we did meet a lot of cool people. I have no pictures. I don't have if someone else didn't take the picture, I don't have it.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And that's one thing, and especially, well, because it's, the cell phones weren't what they were. They weren't either. They weren't in existence, and they weren't what they were, like the easy access. Yeah, because it's something to pull out a camera, to have your phone just go real quick. Hey, click, click. And again, a different time, different environment for us in the business. I'm totally in agreement, because I mean, we could go back and forth with the name dropping, like, man, like, I wish I had pictures with this guy. Like, I wish I had pictures with Eddie. I wish I had pictures with Jericho, with Benoit, with Rock. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Whereas nowadays it'd be so easy. Like back then, it's like you don't want to be perceived as a mark. You want to try, like, no matter.
That was my biggest thing in wrestling. I never want to act like a mark.
Yeah, and it's right, but it's wrong, because it's like, if I think. And I think we're similar in this way. It's like, even back then, we would have approached it in a way that wouldn't have been like, oh, hey, like, like, hey, Brett, can I get a picture? That'd be so cool. And just, hey, just like, I appreciate you, that we get to have dinner at the Heart House. It's awesome to hear. Matt, do you mind if we just real quick?
Yeah.
Like,
do you think we could get a picture?
Yeah. Yeah. And stuff like that.
Truth is, I never even thought about it. Right. Like, it was. And I'm sure he would have been, I'm in his dad's house. I'm sure he would have been extremely gracious about it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
He started talking to us about, like, when he was amateur wrestling in high school and stuff. Very, very down to earth, very easy guy to talk to. But of course, in the back of your mind, you're like, don't overdo it. Don't overdo it. Don't overdo it.
Oh, that's and to go, to seg this way back into the, okay, well, here's Andy Anderson. That's essentially an Alberta guy. That's not an Alberta guy.
Right.
That, like, not meaning like, so, like, you and I didn't meet until however many years, and there's so many. Same thing, like, even like with TJ, like, I didn't meet him until the couple of years ago. We did the charity show, and it's like,
and it's so weird. That's so weird to me.
And it's like, and I've never met Natty.
Right.
And I like so many of these people that, I'd say probably know me, or I don't like you, but just
They've
you've
heard
never
your
met.
name. I tell you right now, they've heard your name.
Okay, so that there you go. Like, it's like TJ, like, and we still chat, now and then, and that. But so through all those years, I only met Brett once. I only met Owen once. Both times were in Nashville. I met Owen backstage. I think I think it might have been the same Raw, because when I introduced myself and said that, hey, like, I'm from Alberta, so I'm actually like, oh, that's really cool.
Oh, okay.
And we started, and he brought up, because I think the Oilers were playing Dallas in the playoffs, so we started talking about hockey.
It was in that era where the Oilers used to finish last when Dallas would finish first, and they'd play every year.
Yeah, and then we ended up knocking them out.
Yeah.
and then with Brett, so that was at the Nashville Arena, and then Brett, I met him backstage at the Nashville Municipal Auditorium when he was with WCW.
Oh, really?
And we were talking. Yeah, we talked for a few minutes, and just like nothing too deep. But again, it just my thing was like, hey, like, I'm an Alberta boy. I'm from like Edmonton, and I'm here doing this. And and he gave me his card, and even then, like, so many of these guys that this is similar to the pictures, where it's like, hey, if you need anything, he's like, give me they give you your phone number, and it's like, this is awesome, but like, I can't call Bret Hart. Like, what am I talking to Bret Hart about?
Phone you. Yeah.
Like, like to ask for advice. Like, what am I gonna? Hey, can you help me get into WWE? What do I need? Like stuff that's really like straightforward that
we should do.
Yeah,
for sure.
But at that time,
would you believe I knew Owen well enough? I know a guy that Owen got signed. A guy that was at the dungeon with us at the time, who doesn't matter who. And I knew Owen enough. Like, if I see him at the gym, I would stop and talk about the weather with him. Again, nothing too deep, but it'd be like, hey, how are you? Because he'd seen me up at the house. Yeah. So we all trained down at BJ. So
the acquaintances, direct.
Yeah, you bet. Like, I specifically remember sitting one time watching TV with him when he was telling me he was getting tired of traveling. Right, he was a family man now. He wanted to be at home. Yeah. Do you think I ever fucking asked that guy for anything? Do you think I ever said, hey, do you think you could give a tape? Or hey, do you think you could watch one of my tapes? Never. Like, what a moron. So
dumb. The amount of people that I could have done that with. That's like,
yeah. You just don't want to bother your friends either, right? Like, I can tell you, as long as I've known TJ since he was 14 years old. I've known Natty since she was probably 15 or 16. Yeah. I've known them their entire lives. I've got tickets from them once.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I won't bother. And I got TJ in touch with my chiropractor. And so it's kind of like, okay, I did you a favor. Now you do me a favor.
Yeah.
And it was literally, and he got me, I thought, nosebleeds. Like, I thought they'd take plastic off chairs for us to sit in, Yeah, no, man. We were with like my niece, and we were, probably 10th row back right on the entryway. I think Bailey came out and high-fived her and hugged her. Like, it made her night, man. Yeah. You know what I mean? I was like, I'll pay for tickets before I ask them. And truth is, I'd probably never ask him again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
I've bought a few, because I've had some people where they're, in that respect, where it's like, hey, if you ever need tickets, let me know. Like, and over the years, especially being poor single dad, even when I was married, so I was like, it's like, look, like, hey, if you can, and that was one of the things for me.
If you want to take a family of 4 to a hockey game, you better have $500 just for tickets.
Dude, that's why we go more to the Oil Kings games and the stuff like that, just because it's that much more affordable. And even then, it's like, I know that sometimes there's some people that I can talk to about possibly getting tickets, or there's somebody else that I work with that has season tickets. So like, hey, do you want to go to the game? Take your kids to the game? Yeah. Absolutely. But so like Brett, Owen, like those guys, and Jinder, it was like several years ago, PWA show was the first time like I had met him, and I meet him. He's like, oh yeah, I know who you are. I was like, yeah, I heard all about you from like Puerto Rico and stuff. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, he's a good guy. Man.
Oh, Jinder, I same thing with him. Like, we kind of chat here and there, and we talk a little bit shop about gym stuff, and
I've been trying to get him on, that dirty bastard, but now he's gotten so busy he can't.
You think we thought all that time when he was doing rehab for his knee?
And it's the thing, he'll send me a text about every 3 months, like, hey man, we'll do it. I'm sorry, I'm really busy right now. We'll do it. And then I'll get this other random text out of the blue, like, okay man, I'm sorry, we'll do it. We'll set something up. So, and I never bother those guys, right? Like, I knew once they started traveling again, that couldn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. And then he starts doing some TV stuff. I was like, I'll catch up with him when he's retired.
Yeah. Well, that's good. You'll be even more polished now than you're.
I want to say, was it the anniversary show that he worked, or was it the Night of Champions? I can't remember. I think Animal was there. And he had
I don't
just
remember.
re-signed. He was working.
Okay.
He was kind of that was, I think, going to be his last indie date, and he just re-signed. And we were sitting in the locker room, and he kind of leans over in my ear. And he's like, "Hey, man, I just re-signed. Don't tell anybody." So I totally had to no sell it, right? Like I couldn't be like, "Oh, congratulations," you know.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, all right, cool story, bro. Tell it again.
Oh,
Yeah.
tremendous. I'm trying to think like, well, who else can we should just do the rest of this now. Just be like name drops. I've got some fun
Yeah.
stories.
Well, yeah, it's actually I heard a lot of mean shit about, and my experience with him. I worked a match with Honky Tonk Man one time, and man, I'm not kidding you. I heard a lot of nasty shit about Honky Tonk, but it was all after, because he was the most professional guy I'd worked with. He was he was so easy to work with. He taught me so much in the 15 minutes I spent with him going over a match and getting in the ring with him. And he didn't take himself too seriously. Do you know what I mean? Like, what I know of Honky Tonk and what I experienced that night are not the fucking same guy.
Wow.
He literally, like, he's going over the match and we get to the finish and I go, okay, and then shake, rattle, and roll. And he's like, well, kid, I'm getting pretty old. It's more just a roll now. You know what? Like, he was so easy. And he says to me, you know, he says, we're going over stuff, and he goes, okay, now once I hit the ground and take that bump, don't pick me up, because then you have to do something else to me. So of course I'm working him. I got him on the ground. I'm working the arm, you know, kind of doing everything.
Yeah.
And then without even thinking, I pick him up. And as soon as I pick him up, I instantly panic, because now I don't know what to do.
You do something.
So I put him back in the corner and I gave him a couple shoulders in the stomach and then pushed him on the ground so he could just do the lazy face. Oh yeah, I was instant panic. As soon as I realized we were off the ground, I was like, oh no, now I got to do something to him. Yeah, but again, and then I heard somebody, you know, a mutual good friend of ours, aka Donnie Hazard, aka Donnie Ace.
Yes.
Sergeant Hazard. He did not get the same experience with Honky Tonk. It was really
and mine wasn't. Yeah, mine was a little disappointing too.
Is that right? Hey.
Yeah, and it was. But the thing I tried to push to him, because like I'm an Elvis guy. I'm a big Elvis guy.
Right.
And so, you know, like, and with him being a face and I was being the heel, and I kind of said like, hey, like I want, you know, like I just wanted to throw out this idea about kind of something like with like an Elvis kind of. He's like, oh no, like I don't do any of the Elvis person. And I'm like, no, like I'm not trying to get you to, but just that, like me being an Elvis fan and like being all like choked, and he's like, oh no. And so I said, okay, well, you know, before we start the match, I kind of grabbed the microphone, and what I had done was, and I don't remember it now, but I had come up with like new lyrics to his song, like to the Honky Tonk Man,
right?
About how I was going to kick his ass, and so he's like, okay, whatever. So it's like it was nothing that he really had to do. Like I just like.
Just give me this opportunity to get you over and get me over.
Yeah, and to get just a little bit more story beside just our match.
For sure.
And so he kind of like foo-fooed it. Like, and I did like, you know, whatever it was, and I'm gonna kick your ass and throw you out back or something like that, and whatever. And it was fine in the match. He didn't really want to do anything, and it was the same thing as like, yeah, it's, and I think I almost did the same thing as you. And the shake, rattle, and roll. It's like, no, it's just like this is just a roll. But even that, it was like very awkwardly done, and it was just Honky Tonk, because I was an Elvis guy. Yeah, you know, like back in the day. So I think he was already gone from Stampede by the time I was watching. So, but when he debuted in WWF, I immediately hey, like I love the Honky Tonk Man because he's an Elvis guy.
Honky Tonk Wayne.
Yeah. So it was a disappointing experience for me as well. Yeah. I mean, the match was okay, but
Harry Smith and I were having a conversation in the locker room. There's another name to drop.
Yeah.
For you people that don't know the name I just dropped, that's Davey Boy Smith Jr.
Yeah.
So anyways, we were bullshitting in the locker room, and I was talking about my experience with Honky, and he started laughing. He goes, I forget where he was wrestling. He goes, and Honky Tonk just kind of looks up, and he's wrestling this kind of out of shape, you know, bigger out of shape guy. And his Honky just looks at him and says, hey, fat ass, you got one bump, use it wisely. And it was like, literally, he was telling the boys, and when he came, he worked to, do you know who Hannibal is? Devin Nicholson?
Yes. Yep.
He had booked this show in Cochrane. Him and Bill Bell were kind of doing this thing in conjunction. And so he'd booked it. And fuck, now I forget where I was going with that story.
Honky Tonk, one bump, use it wisely. Fat Boy.
Matter. Okay. Hey, yeah, use it wisely.
Here. So let me cover you, kid. Here, we're gonna grab a hold. Harry Smith, I worked in a dark match when he was only like 16 or 17 in Vancouver, BC before Monday Night Raw.
Seriously.
Yes, I put him over because he was a babyface and I was a heel. And at the
Right.
time with those dark matches, a babyface, I mean, whatever, it was Davey Boy's kid. So,
Yeah.
whatever, he's going over regardless. But
And he was already a monster then.
well, he was tall. He still hadn't really.
Yeah, he still hadn't filled
yet.
out yet. He didn't really
Yeah.
fill out. He turned 18. It was like he went from like 210 to 250 pounds overnight.
Yeah.
Like he just all of a sudden walked into the locker room one day. I was just like, holy fuck, Harry. Well, he's one of the cool stories for me to always remember him and TJ in particular. Because I met Harry. I don't know if he was 10 yet. He was maybe 10. It was because,
Wow.
long story short, how we met Davey and the family was we were coaching amateur wrestling to Harry's cousin Matthew, who unfortunately had passed away.
Right.
And for Harry's birthday, he wanted to learn amateur wrestling from the guys that Matthew was training with, and that was us. And we happened to be training at BJ's gym at the time. That's literally how we got into pro wrestling.
Wow, that's
People are like,
cool.
"Oh, you had this dream, you wrestled in high school, and then you had this dream to be a pro wrestler." It's like, no, man, I kind of fucked it up and ended up pro wrestling.
Kind of fell into it.
Yeah, literally. I mean, don't get me wrong. One of the greatest, serendipitous experiences of my life. I wouldn't trade it. It's, and I think you're somebody like me in that for as much as you achieve, there's always people that are going to say like, "Oh, you could have done more." And I'll always say like, I don't care what anybody tells me, man. I squeezed every bit of juice out of that fruit. Do you know what I mean? I don't care what I did or didn't do. I loved the 20 years I spent around pro wrestling.
Oh, and I agree with like everything, like for me with the business. And it's funny because people, it's half, glass half empty, half full.
Yeah, for sure.
Could I have done more? I honestly, yeah, like I just kind of stopped the full time and doing what I was doing because of injury.
Yeah.
But people, I kind of always joke, especially now at this age, because at this age we'd be like has-beens, but that means you had to have been somebody. So to me, I always joke about, well, like, no, I'm not a has-been, I'm an almost was.
Yeah, I just say I'm a has-been that never was.
Yeah, so there you go. I'm an almost was. Like I was up there, I did matches, I was on TV, and I got to do like Japan and England and Mexico and Puerto Rico.
You got to see parts of the world you're not going to see doing anything else, right?
Oh, I paid vacations.
Yeah,
man. Vacations, because that's the whole if you love what you do, you never have to work a day. And for all that time that I was wrestling and traveling, never worked a day because I loved it. Guys, complain, like I loved the travel.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially if you don't have any family or anything to worry about. If you're a single guy, like I didn't mind the flights, I didn't mind the hotel. Like I loved it all.
And I still love that because I still romanticize it. When I broke in, I got married in 98. I broke in 96. So I was just about engaged when I broke in, right? I had 10 grand in student loans from going to college. Like I had a whole life before I got into pro wrestling. So when you'd say to me like, "Oh, go down and wrestle in Texas for $50 a day," it's like, no, man, I work $100 a day at home. I actually can't afford to do that. And then it was like, plus I got to pay rent at home. It's not like, I got a wife at home. So it was a different thing for me, right? Like I couldn't just up and go it a lot of times, but also I didn't take those chances. And I think that's, I had a buddy years after, and he'd always told me, he goes, one of your smartest and worst attributes is that you always have to have a fucking safety net. You'll never just throw caution to the wind and go for it.
Yeah.
I was like, well, by that time I had a wife. I can just throw caution. Like, what am I going to do? Default my student loans and get divorced because I want to go to Memphis?
Yeah. Yeah. And at the time I didn't have that response to those things to worry about.
And that's what I say, like pro wrestling, if you're a young single guy or gal, it's an amazing profession. But if you're going to get into it and you have aspirations of traveling the world and you already have an existing relationship, it's tough when you have not relationship responsibilities.
Roots and responsibilities.
Yeah. Because even if we had children, like my wife would have been fine with me, traveling and going away. Yeah. So, but at the same time, it was just kind of like, and think about it when you were doing it in the midst of it. You're going so fast. Like I didn't document any of it. I didn't write anything down. I didn't take pictures because you're just in the middle of it. And we had full-time jobs. Like I would, so you're wrestling in Puerto Rico pretty much nightly, right?
Yeah.
We
4 nights a week.
How many?
4 nights a week.
Yeah. And that's what we did, right? Like usually Wednesday through Saturday or Thursday through Sunday, right? Sometimes you do double shots on Saturday or Sunday. Yep. Even when we started with Stampede, we would wrestle with like a 14-man roster and wrestle twice a night. You'd wrestle a singles match and a, battle royal or whatever.
Yeah, battle royal tag, whatever, something. Yeah.
But my wife and I, she worked, when she started working, she used to work at Husky Energy. She was, I was 25, 26, and we would drive to Lethbridge, wrestle, drive home. work the next day, drive to Medicine Hat, come home, drive to, Enoch, come home, drive to, oh God, okay, it's Friday night. We could make then we could get to the Saskatoon, Regina Friday, Saturday, get home. And we did that for years. And I remember thinking, like, we were never tired. We never felt bad. We never felt as broke as we were. We had no fucking money. Yeah. But it was such a carefree time because all you had to worry about is where's the gym, where's the show.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the life. Like, well, for like us, for that type of, that's the life.
Yeah. It was, and people's like, oh, you like driving in the car? Like, I love driving in the car.
Well, and it was something, and I think it was Steve Austin, I think, encapsulated it perfectly. And I think it was one of his sessions or whatever. And he was talking with somebody about, because you said kind of about like romanticizing about being on the road. And it was like, he was somehow talking about like how much he enjoyed being on the road. So it's like, even now, so wherever he was, if he was like in Nevada or California, wherever, it's like he would drive, he would go and do like a road. He would drive 50 miles just to get a burger.
Right.
Just for that drive, just to kind of get that hit of being on the road.
Yeah.
And it's like, I could relate to that because it's like, okay, like, I was like, oh, well, we're gonna, I don't know, whether it's taking the girls on the road somewhere, or I've got a buddy, he's, he does Elvis tribute. He's awesome. Robin Kelly. It's like, oh, he's got a show like in Camrose or something. It's like, oh yeah, okay, well, I want to go. It's like short little jaunt to, but it's like being on the road.
Yeah.
And it's there's if you get it, you understand it. There's just something to it.
Well, and there's some people that I think, and Brock was one of those guys, again, not to piss on Brock Lesnar in any way, but he was one of those guys that admitted very quickly he didn't like to travel.
Yes.
Right. And he admitted the travel's not for me. And I mean, his schedule now is dynamite. And well earned, right? Like he did pay his dues. But at the same time, I mean, I hear guys, I remember there was a trip, for some reason I couldn't book a trip, and I booked a guy who at the time, I'm not going to piss on his name because he was somebody I really liked, but I was really disappointed me his attitude. And I couldn't be there. And I gave TJ the book. Actually, TJ drove the rental van and took all the boys up. And I can't remember why I wasn't there. When I got home, I talked to TJ and I said, how was it? What was this guy like? And he said his attitude was so fucking terrible. Like, he complained the whole way home. Like, oh, we could be home. Like, literally, like, we could be home watching TV. Do you know what I mean? And I said, well, what did it do for the morale? Because I think at the time we'd have 7-8 guys from Calgary traveling to Edmonton for every show. And he said, oh, it's just like the people just fucking hated it. Like, it was awful. And I never used the guy again. Right. Cause it's like, this is the 15 minutes of the show. That's what we kind of do this for.
Yeah.
But life is lived outside of those 15 minutes. Like, that's where the real bonds are made. Like, yeah, I remember, working some matches or working some programs, but my real memories of wrestling are in the locker room and traveling.
Oh, I for all the time that I spent down in Tennessee, like the different people that I got to drive with, like, like every Sunday, when I was living in Nashville there for a period of about 6 months in '98, I was driving every Sunday with Tracy Smothers. We were driving from Nashville to Georgetown, Kentucky.
Yeah.
If he wanted to drive, he was driving. If I was like, hey man, like you drive, like, of course. And for a while it was like Paul Diamond was there too. So it was like me, Paul Diamond, and Tracy Smothers. Like, that's cool. Or if I was driving like with Debbie Combs, or I'm driving like with Wolfie D and Flash Flanagan, or whoever, like all tons of like, oh, even those, like the name drop here. This is, what I'll. Like, I got some stories. Like, you
got some names to drop.
We got to record. So, and this isn't so much of a learning one; it's just more of a fun story altogether. So wrestling in Puerto Rico for the IWA. I started when the company kind of reopened, because there was initially an IWA like years back, but we started in 1999.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like the new Stampede Wrestling that I worked for.
It was like IWA, the new generation.
Okay.
So what we had done was, when I say we, so I mean, it was like Savio, Victor Quinones, Miguel, a couple others. We filmed, I think, about like 3 months, 12 weeks worth of TV.
Right.
And then we broadcast that first, and then we started doing the shows. So we doing the shows at the time, you're getting the 70, like the small, like the 100 people, whatever. Like, eventually we were building up. I was one of the guys, because I didn't smoke, didn't drink, no drugs, no nothing. Two of the veterans in the original crew there, Ricky Santana, Fidel Sierra, another Cuban assassin. They always had me driving. And part of that was so that I could, young guy, paying dues, whatever, which was cool.
Yeah.
I like to drive, but it's also so that I could learn the island where everything was, right?
Right.
Puerto Rico, you can drive around the whole island in about 4 or 5 hours.
Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's not a big island, but there's at least 2 million people. So anyways, through doing that, and then just kind of learning Spanish and everything like that, kind of being a good, responsible guy that I was, I eventually became one of the guys that would help look after, like if new guys were like, if you were coming into Puerto Rico, I'd probably be the one to be picking up at the airport.
Oh, okay.
Taking, okay, this is kind of the boys' house. This is where we hang out.
Sorry,
something
flashed to me. Was there a guy called Joe Vica involved in
Victor Jovica? He was with Capital with Carlos. That was the competition.
Okay, no, and the reason I asked is there was my sister-in-law's ex-husband somehow knew that guy. And he's like, oh, I could get you booked down in Puerto Rico and blah, blah, blah. And I turned it down because, of course, at the time I was working 200 dates a year with Stampede. But now I'm listening to you like, fuck, I should have went.
Oh, dude, Puerto Rico. I mean, we could have a whole other thing on Puerto Rico. Like for what it was at the time I was there, one of the best places. I love Puerto Rico. My experiences in Puerto Rico so awesome. Yes. But I digress. So back to the story. So
yeah, sorry, man.
Yes, like if you came in, I'd give you the lay of the land and whatever, and kind of help you out. And when we bring names in, a lot of times I was like, hey, like, can you go pick up so and so and look after so and so? And we're here. We're going to rent a vehicle. I want you to take care of. If it was like Paul Bear, if it was I don't know, we want to name drop, but a lot of guys I got to drive with a lot of guys. This particular instance, so this was it a hardcore weekend? I forget, whatever it was. We had Terry Funk and Kane.
Oh man,
were two of the big names. So I was looking after Kane. Terry was there with his wife, and I love Terry Funk. I especially with like the selling and the kind of the drunken, like just a lot of his kind of movements, the way he carried himself. I loved it. And I'm not a guy like Puerto Rico. For some was known as like a place that there's a lot of blood. With IWA, there wasn't. There's some guys that did. I was a guy that preferred not to. So I
never really saw any juice in your matches.
No, I very rarely did. But I even told Savio and those guys, I'm like, look, I said, like, I will do that for a match with Terry Funk. Like, please, like, I wanted to have a hardcore style match because I wanted to do like all kinds of like the fun, goofy,
right,
stuff. I got a chance to do something with him on the last day, but I didn't get to have a match. I get to that, but that's not the main thing of the story. So anyways, so I'm kind of responsible for looking after Kane. So I get him to the hotel, and I'll be driving him to the shows and whatever, because he was there for like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So like I took him to the gym. We worked out together at the gym. Worked out together, but we were in the gym at the same time.
We were besties.
Yeah, gym buddies. So anyways, so the main show was our main shows were usually the Saturday nights. That's usually where we had like our biggest shows. We usually filmed TV, everything like that. So we did this show. So the way it was booked, I had my match. Kane and Terry had their matches so that they weren't main event, because the idea was that I could get them out ahead of, just like if WWE was going to put Hogan on right before the intermission so that he could get out.
Yeah,
or
he gets out of the building before. Yeah.
So that's kind of what this was. So we were parked in this parking lot. I was in Bayamon, and so minivan. There was me and Kane in the front, Terry and his wife in the back. So we get our stuff. We finish our matches. We get our stuff. We're getting ready to head out. And we're leaving it to kind of a small parking lot. Because we were doing like TV, and IWA was like legit, we legit company. It wasn't like just like rinky dink stuff. Right. So we had like production trucks and everything. Somebody had parked their car at an where they shouldn't have. So it was kind of like an angle, like like in one spot, the part of the semi trailer was here, and there was no way for me to get out. We have no idea whose vehicle. Like, what the hell? Like, well, we're kind of sitting there for a few minutes, and I don't remember. They're like, well, how are we going to do this? We can't go in and say like, oh, can the person with this vehicle? And I honestly don't remember who suggested it, but somehow what ended up happening was like it was determined that Kane and I were going to move this car. So Kane and I went out.
The upside of traveling with wrestlers.
Right. And I think actually part of it might have been when because when we were in the gym, I was like, the one thing I do remember is like I think I was like one of the days that he's like I was doing deadlifts and whatever. I was like 200 some pounds, and I think I was deadlifting like 315 or like 3 plates or something, like decent, but whatever. Like
Right.
I didn't think it was like huge. And I remember like he had complimented me. He's like, hey, like that was like good job. Like you're pretty strong for a smaller guy. And so maybe somehow that's where it came up that like we could do this. So what we had done is we went up to the trunk end, and he and I lifted up and then scooched over about 45 degrees, moved this car. So we had enough room. So we moved the car and then we just drove off.
That time you and Kane moved a car.
I kid you not. So it's like someone's going to, whoever came out, it's like their car was going to be different than how but there's going to be no damage.
That's fucking funny.
So it was like Terry Funk and his wife are watching Kane and I, shimmy a car over 45 degrees.
Terry Funk's probably like, man, if I had $1 for every time I seen that.
Oh, yeah. Terry, the one thing I remember with him, he's like, and he's got the sweet old voice, and he was just so cool. But the one thing, like, somehow we were talking about, like my love for wrestling, the passion, and wanted to da 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 da. And he's like, somehow he's like, well, and like if you want, I can't even try to do the voice, but
yeah.
Like, if you want me to like help make a lot of money, he says, if you give me like $10,000, and he says, and I'll teach you about farming. And that was the whole thing. It had nothing to do with wrestling. It's like, you want to make money? It's like, get into like farming. It's 10 grand, I'll make you a millionaire. So that's, but
hey, you want to make money, kid? Get out of wrestling, get into agriculture.
Pretty much.
That's, what I've said that to kids glibly though. Guys will be like, what should I do? What advice do you have for me to get into pro wrestling? Like, first and foremost, go to college.
Yeah.
Finish that, then decide if you want to get into pro wrestling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your parents will appreciate that comment more than anything else, I can tell you.
Oh, all right. Can I drop another story? This is my opportunity, because it's like there's some, with the podcasting, I've been able to drop some stories, and I'm like, okay, I don't want this to be like the morbid thing, but there's this one story that you may not believe because of where it's going to start and where it's going to go. But the only people that know this story, if I can say, our buddy Michael Richard Blaze.
Okay.
I can't remember if I even told Boris this story or not. The Bollywood Boys, Garv and Herv. I forget what they were called in WWE. And Sasha Banks. And I think I told TJ I was going to tell him the story, and I don't think I ever got around to telling him this story. So this was 2002, 2003, somewhere in there. This is an Eddie Guerrero story. So Eddie, just give you a little bit of background. So Eddie Guerrero, I first met him in Puerto Rico after he got let go from WWE the first time.
Okay.
He was doing some of the independents and stuff. He did, he did some stuff in ROH. He came and worked for IWA. When he came to IWA, I was the guy that was put in charge to look after him.
What was that like, man? I'm a huge Eddie Guerrero mark.
I loved it. It was awesome. I mean, that alone kind of helped me a little bit with some other stuff with Eddie down the road. But it was the same thing. Like I got him set up for the hotel, got him to the shows, took him to the gym, and another one was like, okay, like, hey brother, like you ever know, like, here's my number. What am I going to do? Call Eddie. Hi, Eddie. Like, right. But it's like to have his number. It's like, whatever. So that was my first opportunity. What you doing? just
checking in. Hi.
Yeah. So whatever. So we had to exchange numbers, whatever. And I can't remember. I think if we vaguely kept in touch or something like that. He got back onto the roster. So whatever that was, like 2002, 2003, right around, like this was this would have been after the story with D'Lo and Brock, but it was a similar situation where they were coming to town, and Eddie and I were in touch, and I was like, hey, like I'll pick you up from the hotel, pick you up from the airport, take you to your hotel, take you to the show. If it's cool, I can hang out. I'll take. Get back to the airport the next morning, the whole thing, you don't have to worry about anything. Cool. So I had a, so I, it's like I got him. We're talking stuff. Like I said, this is just on the cusp of getting the really big push.
Right. Okay.
At one point, I still remember us driving. You're familiar with Edmonton, so for those, we were driving along the white mud, and I remember he was talking to Vicky, and he was telling her how he'd been talking with Vince, and it's like I got to go shopping. I got to get some nicer clothes because Vince wants to kind of, the big push is kind of coming, and he wants me to look a bit more, professional. So I got to kind of do that kind of thing. So that was cool. It was just a house show in Edmonton, and I know there's a couple of girls that are fans. They're twins. There's Vicky. And I forget their sister's name. I can see their faces. You would know them too because they've come to PWA shows.
There's twins.
And yeah, they're the two girls that are twins. And one of them actually used to work for my dad at his restaurant, and that's why I feel so bad. I can't remember her name.
Oh, you're a bad man, Andy.
Oh, horrible. But I know she has pictures, and she'd actually posted them on Facebook once. I'm like, hey, isn't that? And she's like, and it kind of like all kind of fell in line. Mandy, and then Vicky's just Mandy worked for us. So anyways, so there was a meet and greet prior to like earlier in the afternoon, the show or something like that. So I remember like we got to the arena because it was at the Coliseum. Sable was there and others were there. And so I remember at one point we're like, okay, well, we're going to, he was hungry. So like, I know there's a Subway not too far. So, okay, like we'll grab Subway. I remember him saying like, Sable, like, do you want anything? I think we got something for Sable too. So we drove, and it was the one right by, at the time, it was right by the stadium, kind of 82nd Street there. Oh, I think it's like right around like, yeah, well, it's not Gretzky, but it's opposite. There's like a Legion Hall. I think that's where RCW runs right now. Okay. But there was a Subway. So anyways, we picked up Subway. We're coming back, and so I got to park on the kind of that downward ramp that goes into the Coliseum, right? And as we're walking, we were talking about the gimmick and things he was doing. And for the life of me, to this day, I still can't remember what it was called, but there was, when I was working in Tennessee, and I mentioned earlier about doing the shows with Tracy Smothers. Yeah, we drive every Sunday. It was Georgetown, Kentucky, Mountain Wrestling Association. Some of my most fun heel working with Tracy there. We actually had to get escorted out by state troopers one night. That's another story. But there was a finish that Tracy gave me. He says, "Oh, you should do this for one of your matches." And there was a name for it. It's like a dusty finish or something.
Yeah, you bet.
There was a name for it, and I can't remember what it was called. But we're walking, so we parked, and we're walking kind of like just like into the man door, and it's like man, it's like I said to him, like, man, I'm surprised with the gimmick yet you haven't done that name finish. And so we kind of stopped right before the door, and he's like that name. He's like, well, what's that? And I was like, you've never heard of it? And he's like, no. And I said, well, it's you do this deal where like if you and I were working and the referee had his back turned, it's like, if I had like the title belt or something like that, it's like I would take it, I would toss it to you, and then I would drop down and sell. The referee would turn around, see it with you, and then you get disqualified. And he's like, wow. I was like, you never heard of that? He's like, no.
Are you fucking serious right now?
So that night he worked Matt Hardy, and guess what the finish was?
Get out of here, because that's one of Eddie's most famous spots.
I know. So, so afterwards, he finishes the match. He comes back, and I remember saying to him, like, because I was watching through the entranceway or whatever,
right?
And so he comes back, and we're kind of walking. I'm like, hey, I said, that finish looked kind of familiar. And I still remember he just kind of like, and for those that know Eddie, like love Eddie, it was that kind of that smirk, kind of just like a
gotcha.
That. And then from that point on, the finish started to show up.
Right. So
essentially, if people are like, well, is that what you're saying? Are you saying what I think you're saying? I gave Eddie Guerrero that finish.
That's actually an amazing story. What you need to tell that story first. Fuck that Stone Cold story. I'm just kidding. We're gonna do this again. I'm gonna have to edit how this goes.
I've been holding on to that because like, and it's like,
What's one of those stories? Truth is, probably most people will tell you you're full of shit. But
Well,
because
right.
I know you the way I know you're not full of shit.
No, and I have no reason to. Like it's and it's like, and so getting back to Mandy and Vicky, like there's they posted pictures one day, and there's a picture of the meet and greet, and there's Sable sitting there, and then there's Eddie sitting there, and you can see me in the background. And then there's another picture. There's someone else. I think they've taken a picture too, because like the down ramp that goes to the Coliseum, and then there's like the fence to kind of all the people,
right,
keep the people out, right?
Yeah.
And there's pictures of like Eddie and I, like kind of, I think because I think I used my mom and dad's minivan or something, because it was a nicer ride. Right. So it was like, there's like us with the van, there's us walking, and I'm like, this is like right before I tell him that, and it was like, and I remember I was like, so there's somebody else I'm going to told too. And Shane O'Ryan, I forget, I think that was his wrestling name, but somehow I think he knew the story. And he's like, yeah, he says, I remember being at that house show. He says, I remember that finish. He says, like, I believe you. Like that's
hilarious.
Yeah. Man. And I think after I told MRB, I think he said something. He's like, you know what? He says, I bet you if you talk to Matt Hardy about that, like Matt Hardy would probably actually remember that.
Right.
Like
it was such a cool finish.
Yeah, and it was so different, and it was like I said, like it blew me away.
I ripped that finish off immediately after I'd seen it. I think I was booking somewhere at the time, and I ripped it off immediately.
Oh, and it's not like that I'm taking credit that I invented the finish, because that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
But because the first time I used it was in Georgetown, Kentucky, and I think it was probably like with Wildcat Chris Harris, who had like a run in TNA, because he and I were programmed together, and that was one of the deals. But I'm positive it was Tracy that was the one that gave me the finish. But there was a name for it. I can't remember what it was. And like I said, so then I said the name to Eddie, and he's like, well, what's that? And so I said, well, this is what it is. And then he went on to do it. And it's like,
that's so funny. So even if he knew it, you still sparked his memory. Like you still, gave him
because I mean, for him being around, and it was second generation or whatever, like it's but maybe that's not something that would have been in like a lucha style, right? Like something in Mexico.
The thing is too, in wrestling, when you're traveling so much and you're doing so much, you forget, right? Like you go back to your old matches and you'll see moves in those matches like, fuck, why don't I do that anymore?
Yep.
Like I used to always love this little step, just a little step under, guy goes to shoot you, reverse step under, just quick back elbow. You used to love it, and for whatever reason I just stopped doing it. Right? It's just one of those little, I think you froze on me.
And you're like, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but then there's other shit I used to do.
But you were still good. I can still hear you.
Yeah, okay. Well, and then there's other shit.
Good here. Yep.
I'm good.
Yep.
I would do other stuff, and then I went away for a while and came back, and everybody was doing that shit. Not that I'd invented it or whatever. It was just stuff that I'd done. So I was like, God damn, I got to come up with a whole new thing, a whole new move set, because all my stuff's gone now because I left.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because and actually what sparked it for me, even just to remember with the story, not that I'm ever going to forget. Well, I mean, the way my mind's going, maybe one day I will forget. But even recently, AJ Styles did it on Raw.
Yeah, you're right. Very recently, like within the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, hey, it's like,
wait,
I got that from Eddie. Who? Wait, 6 degrees of separate. It's like,
I'm gonna need some money.
Yeah, right, man.
I'm shadow booking here.
I know it's like give me a mention in a book or something at least. Like hell, like a little something. But
give me a mention. That's why I used to get mad. I'll be honest, they used to get mad at Harry and TJ because they would do all these interviews and they would mention everybody from Calgary except me, and I'd be like, fuck those guys. I used to get so bitter. Then somebody wrote a book and Harry dropped my name in the book, so all was forgiven. Then
no, it's all good. It's all good. I think I said that to Harv and Gur once. I'm like, hey, like, because I got some stuff with them too. I'm like, man, just like mention me in your book, please. Like nobody else has at this point. There's a couple guys like, I
used to have this catchphrase that I would just Duke Durango total display of ability, and I had some t-shirts and shit. And so TJ's down working in, I think FCW might have just changed to NXT. Like it was right around that time. And I just get this random text on a Friday night and it's like, by the way, I might have dropped total display of ability tonight. So, and I just said to him, you know what, man? I was like, nobody knows I ever used that. Please, if you can trademark it and make money off it, by all means. And I don't think
Go
he
ahead.
ever used it again. Somebody probably said like, that sucks. Don't ever say it again.
Where'd you come up with that? Oh, some guy in Calgary.
Yeah, some bum.
Oh, that
You know what?
it's funny. Not to catch up, but it just goes to show it's so difficult, like next to impossible, to come up with anything original in our business.
Yep. There was a long time, really and truly, that I didn't watch wrestling because I knew I was booking in wrestling and I knew it would influence everything I did.
That, you know what, and that one of the things when I broke in, and I'm sure if you either heard this or you're gonna, well, you'll agree either way. When I was first breaking into the business and still, primarily just a fan that had a clue, right? Like,
Right.
It's like we talked about that earlier. It's like you knew some stuff, but stuff didn't add up, and how is this going to work? I remember Vance telling me, he says, once you get into this business, you will never watch it the same way again.
For sure.
And like 10,000%, it's you even if we tried, we can't.
No, we watched, and that's like I tell people that fans that say like, oh, I've been watching wrestling my whole life and I see the same match you do. It's like, you don't. And I'm not being disrespectful because there's a lot of people that are experts about wrestling that have never gotten a ring, but you don't have the same perspective I do.
No, absolutely not.
Right? That's like saying I know how that's like saying I know how an airplane flies, never been in a cockpit.
Yeah. And the same thing can be said for anything. Right? It could be hockey, football, baseball. You can say aeronautics, whatever. If you're in that business, you're a part of that. You're going to look at differently than Joe Blow.
Well, you know what? I just saw something today. I watch a lot of MMA. I probably watch more MMA dirt sheets than wrestling dirt sheets anymore. But there was this one. Some fan was talking shit to MMA fighter Kevin Lee. And like literally DM'd him like, I could submit you, I could kick your ass. Like, this guy's a fucking, all but a world champion at this. And so he puts up video of this, what I'll call this fucking Mark comes down to the gym and he subs him in about 3 seconds. You know what I mean? It's like, guy, there's what people do, and then there's at that level, right? Like,
yes,
I'm so tired. One of the reasons I actually quit going to hockey games and football games are the fans. They're like why I don't go to church. The people there fucking ruin it for me.
Yeah.
Because I used to I went with my brother. He had season tickets to the Stamps. So I wanted to bond with my brother. Yep. His buddy bailed out on him that was going. So he couldn't go that year for whatever reason. So I took up the tickets, 9 season tickets. Let's do it, man. I'm not kidding you. At the end of the year, he's like, you want to go next year? I'm like, I will never go to another fucking football game in my life. There was these 2 ladies that would sit in front of us. And this is what ruins a lot of things for me is like, you can enjoy, but these ladies, a lot of ladies play football now, so I don't want to go too hard on this, but these ladies are word and age and from a generation where I know they had never taken a snap in their lives, and they're coaching. Oh, they should be doing this, they should be doing that. And I'm looking at my brother and he knows I'm a little bit outspoken.
Yeah.
And I could feel him like squeezing my leg, like, shut the fuck up, don't say anything. So the only thing I ever said was, there's cheerleaders at the game. And to me, Edmonton's cheer squad is something to behold, right? Like,
absolutely,
that's an impressive gimmick.
One of the best.
Yeah, for sure. And anywhere, really, any sport.
Yep.
So anyways, the Stampeder cheerleaders, they make their way around and they come to our side. And again, would it be a career goal for my daughter to be a Stampeder cheerleader? No, but it is what it is. It's something they enjoy doing. Who gives a shit? And these ladies would always get on like, oh, here come the strippers. And so finally, probably about game 7, I lean and I just sort of say, you know what the difference between cheerleaders and strippers are? These ladies have the same amount of clothes on when they go to the other side of the field. And that was all I ever said to those ladies the whole time. It was just like, just don't come. So I stopped. This is about 2011, man. I'm done with pro sports. I don't watch. Like, it's nuts. But anyways, I don't want to get off on that tangent.
But I hear you though, and it's my little bit for me. I love going to hockey games. I love going to football. I love going to sporting events.
Yeah, for sure.
I can get past most of it. It's for me. It's actually going to wrestling shows where whether it's watching pay-per-views or going to live events, and like. There's no way I can say this that, probably making it sound harsher than it is, but it's that same kind of thing where everybody knows, everybody's an expert.
Yeah.
And you know what? You're entitled to your opinion. I'm not knocking that. I'm not, by all means, go ahead. But, to be at live events and people are, oh, this is stupid. Why are they doing that? They should be doing this. And you kind of look and, and I still remember one time with buddies, and I was already involved in the business. I think for whatever reason, I was like back home for something, whatever it was. There was a SmackDown event in Calgary, and we drove down to Calgary. We're watching the event. We're sitting, I don't remember whatever, we weren't on the floor, but we were like whatever the next kind
lower
of
bowl.
Thank you. And it was Undertaker. Was it Undertaker and Nathan Jones, or Undertaker and somebody relatively green?
Jones.
Yeah, that's a big boy. Whatever it was something like that. And this is at the time SmackDown was not live.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it's like if maybe we did like Raw in Edmonton, and then maybe it was like SmackDown was.
Yeah, they would record SmackDown Tuesday night.
Yeah, like that type of thing.
Right.
And so we're there, and something happened. Whatever they botched up something. And so I'll say this part, and then let's see if you kind of figure this is going to go. So whatever it was. So say if it was like, Taker shoots him off the rope, duck the clothesline, get the elbow. And so maybe it's like he threw him off, and maybe he didn't duck the clothesline, and so it just looked like crap.
Right.
So immediately, Taker picked him up, took him back over to the ropes, the same side, shot him off, did the spot again.
Right.
Now, you and I as trained professionals, and of course, everybody else that are experts know, if you screw up the spot, you don't go right back and do the same spot.
No, it's later.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing something that is being taped that they'll be able to edit.
Yeah, so, it's time constrained.
Yeah, right. So, and of course, watching SmackDown later, it was cut and edited in a way that we saw
right
second take. But anyways, the point of this is watching this, and I still I'm sitting, I'm watching, and then the botch happens, and they get up, they do the spot again, and someone like a couple of rows over the next section is like, oh no, what are they doing? They should know you don't do the same spot right after you screw it up. What? I can't believe what these guys are doing. And it took, if it was, if I had my inner Duke Durango at the time, but it took everything in me. And you know what? I don't know if it was a fan. Because, and again, I don't know Calgary guys. Maybe it was a Calgary guy that was trying to put himself over.
Right.
But I just remembered that he was basically crapping on Taker and whoever it was for doing that. And my first thing in my head was like, you're trying to show off, and you obviously have no freaking clue, because this is going to get edited, because this isn't live, and they don't care about the live audience, because they're doing it for TV. But it's just like that kind of thing.
That mentality.
It's just like,
yeah.
We yeah.
Well, it's the same reason and again, even liking it to a hockey game, how many times when you go to the Oil Kings, there's a power play working the puck back and forth, working it between the half boards and the point, across the point, back to the half boards, back and forth. And all of a sudden you start hearing the fans yelling, shoot. Yeah. Like, really, these kids are playing elite level hockey. Do you think they got here because they were listening to fucking morons in the fan tell them to shoot?
Yeah. Oh, and you know what? I mean, the fan of me for hockey, I'll and I still, it's a 2-on-1, and it's like, obviously, like, hey, dude, like, I can tell from my vantage point way up in the nosebleeds, you need to shoot.
I've got the video game view up here, right?
But it's one thing,
and I've done it too, right? Oh, come on, Junior, shoot that puck.
Yeah, and we all do. And it's one thing where it's like, to me, it's almost like it's almost like a spot or a gimmick. You do it here and there, and it kind of means something. It's like, come on, shoot, because you're excited. But if you're doing it for 20 minutes of every period of every play. Yeah.
What he should have done. You know what he should have done? Shut the fuck up. You don't even know what he was trying to do.
Yeah. You know what? Let's go find Daryl Cates, and here, you can replace Tippett behind the bench. Better yet, you can be Connor's wingman. How about that? Let's
actually, I would go one step farther, and I'll say, until you're willing to volunteer even to coach your fucking kids hockey, shut up.
There you go.
On that happy note, buddy.
Well, wait. I know you want to cut me off, but there's one other thing that I wanted to talk about.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, and this will be the last thing I
I know
promise.
you
'cause
want to cut me off.
Okay, well,
Because I got to go pee.
okay, this is the last. Well, I have my Diet Pepsi here. I haven't touched.
Well, yeah, I drank a whole cup of tea already.
Okay, so this is my thing, and this is just for fun, kicks and giggles, kind of like fantasy booking or however you want to put it.
Okay.
Because in our time, like you said, I'm an Alberta guy that's not an Alberta guy.
Right.
However we want to play this.
No way. You're an Alberta guy now.
I am an Alberta guy.
Yeah,
That's
your
fair
heart's here.
enough. So whatever, heart. Ha ha ha.
See, I'm so funny. I don't even know when I make.
You still got the dad jokes, even though the kids aren't there. So, our times, whenever you kind of came back, whatever, because I think I came in around like 2011, 2012. So whenever you came back, we never faced off against each other. We never tagged together.
No.
It never happened. We kind of just ran the way our program, and it's like when with Kurt, I mean, we both kind of were fortunate enough being veterans to kind of have some creative input.
Yeah, we got to book our own shit.
and it was never, I don't think, at least I could say it probably the same for you, it was never like a thing that's like I didn't want to work with you. It just never happened. It's just
no. Actually, you were somebody that I looked at and thought, I can't work with that guy because we're both such strong heels. We'll be fucked.
And that there is our, because that's kind of what I thought too, is like, it's like, okay, well, if we work, it's like it's a similar thing.
Yeah,
and
I
it's
think
like,
we have a very similar working style.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. So it's like, I'm trying to think, it's like, okay, it's like, well, how do we fantasy book a match? It's like, what would, if you have like Duke Durango and Andy Anderson, like in a tag match?
Ooh.
Like how, yeah. And this is why, like, even when you said you're retiring, I'm like, no, like you can't retire because you still like, like I still, we still got to do something at some point. And I was thinking about it. And so here's my pitch. So if this ever happens, it's to be funny because someone's going to come back, sometime later because you'll come out of retirement.
I'm going to be honest with you. Somebody's actually put a match on the table for me right now and said, name your opponent.
Well, we got to get a tag match. This is how I see this. It's like you and I as a heel tag team, we would come out, whether our opponents were already out or whether even before the introductions, there would be so much jaw jacking. It would be more like a stand-up comedy night than a wrestling match.
We would even have to wrestle.
No, this is the whole thing. So this is how I'm looking at it. It's like, and us being the way we are, it's like, we'd be like, okay, man, like we're going to do this stuff. We're going to do this. This is how this is going to go. I'll take the pin. It's like, no, man. It's like, don't worry about it. Like, I'll take the pin. It's like, no, man.
Yeah.
They do that. Like, I'll take it. We're in Edmonton. It's like, don't worry. I got it. No. Because we're in Edmonton. You're from Edmonton. I'll take the pin. Let me take it. Yeah. Or if we're in Calgary, I'm like, no, Duke, I'll do the honors.
And you know what? That's how you know when you're working with good guys.
Yeah.
Right. Like none of us ever look like jobbers, but me and Chris Steele, literally, if you ever really watch our matches, essentially we just take turns taking the pins.
Yeah. Well, whatever. Yeah. It's So this is.
That's.
Well, hang on. I got this is so.
Okay, well, now my brain's working on.
Oh, dude, this is so we get our opponents into the ring, and it can be whoever it is, and what I could see happening with the bell would ring. Let's say you're starting. So you're jaw jacking inside the ring. I'm kind of jaw jacking outside the ring. We're doing this stuff, every single thing except locking up, and just 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. And then I could just see it where like it finally at some point, it'd be like, whatever, you turn around, you say something to me, or we're jaw jacking at a fan. Opponent A comes up behind, rolls you up, schoolboy. 1, 2, 3. That's it. But then being the consummate heels that we would be, so there'd be like no bumps, there'd be no lockup, there'd be nothing. It'd be like 10 minutes of just, we'd be doing like PWA fan roast or something.
That'd be hilarious.
So we do that, and they were like, "Hey, whoa, we're Duke wasn't ready. This lady here, 4 eyes in the front row, she was distracting Duke, and we're gonna restart the match. Give us the one more chance. To give us the one more chance. Okay, so Duke, I know you're a little thrown off here. Let's tag. I'm gonna come in. Another like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, same thing. Just Duke, I'll turn around to you. Duke, what the hell is wrong with these people? Schoolboy, 1, 2, 3, and it's like, and these guys and that's the entire thing.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm editing this out so we can actually do this. We got to do this.
I thought about that the other day after you said it, because I was thinking about like, okay, well, I want to throw like if we ever talk about like you and I and PWA and never crossing paths, and that is what I saw was just the constant just
that would be hilarious.
and then just a roll up 1, 2, 3 and. Wait, we're ready. This guy was distracting me here because he's fucking fat and he's out of shape and he's eating these hot dogs and made me want to vomit. I was just about to talk to Andy about like, we got to get out of here. And it's like, okay, yeah, it's like, okay, give these guys a second chance. And it's like, okay, Duke, I know you're rattled. I got this. And I come in and then, then get ready to lock up and then like, hey, what did I say? And then, the same thing, just da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Fine. It's like, Duke, I can understand why you were so distracted. These people are just like the word, boom, 1, 2, 3.
All right. I'm telling you promoters now, we're going to bring this match to a town near you. book the Andy Anderson, Duke Durango show while you can.
Oh, now he's got to think we're the real Jurassic Express.
Or the Geriatric Express.
You got you got 0 bumps, brother.
Hey, fat ass, you got 0 bumps. Use them wisely.
All right.
Oh man, that was so good, buddy. That's honestly one of the funnest ones I've done so far, and I definitely see a part 2 in our future. We didn't cover enough.
No, please. I would love to, and that's why, like I said, because I knew once we got going that there's all whatever you want to touch on that.
Well, yeah, and like I said, I'm almost thinking like we should just book part 2. We'll get together in the next week or so and book part 2 because I still want to talk to you. Like I want to talk to you about the Rumble. Like I had all kinds of shit I wanted to talk to you about.
And that's why, like I know with me, like the few other ones that I've done, is like how much time. It's like okay, like pick 2 or 3 things because I like to talk.
Yeah. And
just but like it's to me, it's not just the one sided. Like I still want that conversation.
Well,
right?
You and I have always had, even like you say, even though we don't know each other well, there's always been a good banter. Like yes. I remember you trying to book matches in the back and I'd just be fucking around all the time. And Chris Steele would be trying to book and you and I'd just be joking around.
Just go with it, man. Just go with it. Like it's no, let me know. And I would love to. Like,
we're going to do this again very soon, man.
Cool.
Right on.
Cool.
Thanks, Andy.
All right. Thank you, Duke. Appreciate it.
You bet. We'll talk to you soon, brother.
Have a good pee.
Duke,
Thanks,
you
pal.
suck.
You shut your mouth.